This is Linux Unplugged, a very special holiday edition of the show for 2016. Oh, welcome to Linux Unplugged, the show that promises to be the best of, but how could it actually deliver? My name is Chris. On a very special edition of the show, we decided to give people the week off, and by people, I mean everybody but the beard and I, because this is our collection, our look back at 2016 for the Linux Unplugged program. And how can you encapsulate this show in one single best of? It can't be done. And let's be honest, I'm too busy thinking about the presents for my kids to think about this, so we pawned it off onto a bunch of bots. They were powered by the Google Compute Cloud. They just had to analyze our inboxes for like a year, and then they came up with the best of topics for us into a spreadsheet, which I have right here. And now we're going to formulate that into a show for you. What could go wrong? Some of that is actually true. No, coming up on this week's episode, we'll go back over the year for Linux Unplugged, pick out a few of the gems, and see if we can spot a few of the trends, too. You know, that virtual lug you never know what you're going to get. It's a random mix. The show really is fairly unstructured. When we launch into a Linux Unplugged episode, we have a brief outline of what we want to cover. But the good stuff is always kind of spontaneous. It's the juicy stuff. So let's look at this list, see what the Google bots have come up with, and see what might be a little interesting. Now, I'm looking through, I see a couple of things. Let's start out here with a server in your pocket. We can start talking about Mate, and then the classic debates of the traditional desktop versus Unity versus GNOME begin, marking the first of many debates for 2016.
So, Wimpy, I'm interested to some degree to get your perception, because Ubuntu Mate is one of those distros where I have not, to the best of my knowledge, found a single thing that when using Ubuntu Mate where it makes me feel like I'm on an alternative desktop from standard Ubuntu. Everything just works. I mean, literally everything just works. In fact, so much so that all of the production machines that I have here in Grand Forks, with the exception of the one I'm on now, but all the rest of them are actually running Ubuntu Mate because it runs lighter than it does with Unity. And I'm wondering, what kind of considerations went into that, and how you guys feel about that, and how that plays out.
Well, Ubuntu Mate is just Ubuntu. In fact, it is Ubuntu. When you boil it down, you simply, I say simply, it's taken a year and a half to do. You remove Unity and you put the Mate desktop on top, but then you keep all of the Ubuntu tools and integrations that already exist underneath the hood, which is what gives you all of that stability and just works goodness of Ubuntu on a traditional desktop environment. So, and one of the reasons why Mate is lighter than Unity is that it's based on GNOME 2 with all of the old compatibility stuff from GNOME 1 removed and all of the underpinnings upgraded to the latest versions of all the recent technologies. And it's all written in C, so it's a very lightweight implementation by comparison to what it was when it was GNOME 2 in its sort of last versions. So it's kind of happenstance in some respects that Mate has now come out as a lightweight desktop alternative.
Outstanding. Anyone else have thoughts or opinions on desktop environments? And good.
I sorry if my audio is terrible. I'm in America for scale. So there's a few things. One, whenever anyone says I'm one of the few people who like Unity, I want to slap them, because there are millions of people who use Unity.
Okay,
Watch out at scale, Noah.
Yeah. And saying I'm one of the few people. What actually is the case is there are a few really negative people who don't like it and who are very vocal, and there's a vast number of people who use it and aren't vocal. So, saying you're one of the few people, you should actually say I'm one of the majority who like Unity, to be fair. So the original question, from the guy posted on Reddit was about, why don't we just use GNOME? You could use that same argument about every single desktop. Why don't you all just all pack up and go home and use something else, is effectively what you're saying. And every single desktop has their own niche that they want to fulfill, or use cases that they address that others don't. Like, for example, Elementary have their niche. It's not so much a niche. I would like to have a well-designed, pretty robust, functional desktop. That sounds like a reasonable thing, and so I think it's unreasonable to suggest that people who are working on those things should throw that away and use something else instead. You might just as well say, why don't KDE give up and switch to GNOME? It's a nonsensical argument from my point of view.
That's fair. So basically, and I admit that this is a horrible, horrible thing to base a generalization on, but there was I'm admitting that up front. But it was a couple months ago, maybe even a year ago, that we did a poll, a straw poll, and to find out what desktop environment people were using, and I was shocked at how many people didn't vote for Unity, and GNOME shot way to the top, and Unity was down there. And I guess I've had that incorrect or correct perception that Unity just wasn't preferred by a lot of the people that are aware of other desktop environments that are out there. And I fully admit that working in the space that you work in, you're going to have a much, much, much more realistic perception, of what actually
completely biased. Or I'm completely biased, and you should throw away my opinion completely, and you should only listen to people who are outside of this bubble, because their opinion won't be tarnished. Potentially is one side of it, but the flip side is any of these polls are deeply flawed. The same way that using DistroWatch as your measure for
exactly
how
the same
distro is. It's ridiculous. And people who place any importance on something which is basically a poll, which can be shared amongst a subreddit, which massively skews the numbers for any one distro, plus or minus, when in fact the actual people who use and like a particular desktop or user interface or application or whatever are ultimately never going to see that poll. My mum uses Ubuntu and has used Ubuntu for years. She will never see that poll and never click on anything in that poll.
That's exactly the point I was thinking, is that
however many millions of people in China use the Ubuntu desktop, they're never going to see this because the thing's written in English, for one. So it's just ludicrous.
We in particular also are a community of, Linux enthusiasts and people who like customization. I think some of Unity's strengths is that it can be widely deployed, and it's pretty easy for people to just get it. The icons are right there on the left. You hit the super key, things just work. So it has a lot going for it. Like you said, your mom can use it. My mom uses it. It's great.
Well, and we also have Unity is actually the default desktop not the default desktop. It's the only desktop on all of our kiosk machines that we deploy. And so basically, if you think about the target audience there, we're taking people from all walks of the technical spectrum and saying that no matter who walks in, if they sit down and they want to check their email, print a boarding pass, or check the weather, they're going to be able to accomplish those things quickly, easily, and without complaining to the front desk. Because, of course, if they complain, then we lose the contract. And what we found is that little bar on the side of Unity, which, by the way, requires no tweaking and requires no extensions, which means we don't have to update anything, is incredibly useful in a situation like that. And so I agree that the average person walking around the street is going to sit down and have no trouble using Unity. And I think I even started out by saying, I phrased it poorly, but the gist of the message was, it's my personal belief that Unity is a more polished desktop than GNOME is. But for whatever reason, and maybe it is just that people are terribly vocal, I guess there is a perception from some people that there's a perception from some people that the Unity desktop is inferior. Correct or incorrect?
Well, that's different. It's like any individual, like any Reddit consumer, is entitled to have their opinion, and it's perfectly fine for someone to say Unity is inferior because of these XYZ reasons, in the same way that someone might not like Enlightenment, or someone might not like KDE because it doesn't work their workflow, or the apps don't look right, or for whatever reason, it's perfectly fine for people to have their opinions, and like buttholes, everyone's got one. The problem is when you try and extrapolate from a poll on a random website somewhere and make bold, assertive statements about whether something is right or wrong, or whether something is good or bad based on a button clicked by a bunch of random people on the internet. It makes no sense whatsoever to me, but that's just me.
No, I think that's completely fair.
Let's talk about my Librem impressions. What's the point of a perfect desktop if you don't have great hardware? Okay, Wes, you had some time to
Yes, I did. It's a nice looking laptop.
It is. It feels good.
Yeah, it's not too heavy. It's reasonably well balanced. It's metal, so that's kind of cool. You don't see that every day in a Linux laptop.
So what is missing, as far as I'm concerned, on the Librem 15?
I will say there are some sharp edges on this thing.
That's true. That's true. That is true. There's something missing, though, that's a pretty big deal to me. Can you guess what it is? You're looking in the right area right now. You're warm. You're real warm, Wes. You're real warm.
Well, there's no CD drive, but I don't think that's what you want.
You're right, but that's not it.
It's got SD card. It's got USB. It's got a DC in. That's important.
That is important.
It's got some seemingly mysteriously unlabeled switches.
Yes, it does. Unlabeled switches, hardware switches.
It's got HDMI.
Yeah.
I don't know.
There's one port that's not there that's pretty important to me. Ethernet.
Oh!
Yeah, there's no Ethernet. And the one I backed specifically did list Ethernet.
That's a bummer.
It was one of those like little RJ45 drop-down ports that is like a half port that you have to like pry open.
Pry open before you can actually use it.
But in the crowdfunding version, it did list Ethernet. I don't like being live on the air and relying on Wi-Fi. So that was a bit of a bummer. It was the version I got, the edition I got, no Ethernet. And I've tried to track down when the Ethernet kind of disappeared, if it was the switch to Rev 2 or not. But the initial report of Rev 2, it would have Ethernet. And then there was another post where it doesn't. I have a few links in the show notes. So I was a little,
You'd have to probably use like a USB 3 adapter or something.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where the only reason why I kind of mention it is because I wouldn't have bought it if it didn't have Ethernet, because Ethernet's actually a pretty big deal to me. I actually like gigabit speeds, not 802.11 speeds.
And you want low latency for studio stuff anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So that was sort of my first impression. But outside of that, the metal coloring, like this is not a small thing. Like they nailed this. This looks mine is not the dark metal. Mine is like an exact, looks like a MacBook.
It really does.
Yeah, metal, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's not a bad looking machine at all.
A couple other things, just first impressions that jumped out at me is the version I looked at online. They had, let's see if I can pull it up here for you. They scrolling. They show, there it is. They show what they call the purism key, which is the super key, which is where the Windows
make
key
sure everything's pure. Right?
I'm gonna go ahead and open the laptop up, which will wake it up. So you may start hearing it. Wes, if you could just take a look at the keyboard. What does that look like? What key? Does that super key to you look like a square to you, or does that look like a Windows key to you?
No, that looks like the Windows logo, Chris.
Yes. I was a little surprised at the keyboard.
Are you running Windows on there? Did it come with Windows?
No. No. I was a little surprised that the keyboard had a Windows key. Not a big deal, but I was expecting a hardware.
That's another, you're going to have to get one of those little penguin stickers.
Yeah. And the other thing that's challenging about this is the specs that they list online do not match the specs that I was shipped, because I got an older model. And the main thing that's really jumping out at me about this one, I don't know if you can hear it, Wes.
What's that? Is it windy in the studio, Chris?
No, Wes. I've woken the laptop up, and so it is. That's the sound it makes, and it's loud enough, Wes, that like you walk into
is that?
That's the laptop.
The fan.
That's the laptop, and I got to tell you, you walk into a room and you can hear this thing.
Yeah, definitely. I heard it when I walked into the studio.
In fact, I'm gonna put it to sleep again, so the sound goes down. But it's very loud.
Are you holding it up to the microphone and shaking
close to it? No. My mouth is much closer than the fan. Yeah. I now have it off.
It's very quiet when it's off, so that's
it sounds like
weird noise.
It sounds like what other laptops make when they're like totally maxed out. Well, it might be a little weird because the gate is trying to specifically filter it out.
Right.
Yeah. So that
it sounds like you're rendering a video or something, but.
So that sort of almost immediately eliminates it for production use. Wes, however, brought over a mini screwdriver kit, and I'm considering opening the bottom of it and seeing if I can replace the fan. It's not driver
least take a
controlled.
look, you know?
So here's what I tried to do: is it ships with Purism OS, and I thought, which is using Cinnamon for the desktop. And the nice thing about that is you can actually manage the trackpad. So I reloaded it with Ubuntu 16.04, and did all the installation, set everything up. The only proprietary driver in use is the Intel microcode stuff.
Yeah.
It's got Broadwell Iris 6100 graphics.
Ooh. That sounds nice.
Yeah, it's a 3 gigahertz processor. There is nothing you can do thermal management wise about that fan. So I could not. There was no driver to load. There was no LM sensors command. There's nothing you can do. It is just hard set to full blast. It's wired just on maximum.
You probably won't have any overheating problems.
Yeah. So my hope is I'm going to pull off the bottom and see if I can replace that fan or whatever. I mean, with integrated graphics and whatnot, I just can't imagine it needs to be running like that.
Especially when you're not actively really doing it. I mean, when it's just sitting
thank you. So FreeBSDSA says the email from 2715 states that the RJ45 was removed from Rev 2. Yeah. Is there UFI settings for it? Perhaps. Go ahead, Wimpy. You had a question regarding the fan noise.
No, I've got a potential solution for fan noise.
Mm-hmm.
So, Entroware ran into this fan noise problem when they were working on the same line of machines, and it's a bug in the firmware from the ODM, and you may be able to work around this by holding the power down for like 10 seconds and hard powering off the machine, and that may reset the system and the fans may correct themselves.
Okay, so I'm holding it down right now. Of course, I just went to sleep when I did that, but actually just turned off instantly. Yeah, that I'm willing to play around with. That is,
Yeah, that'd be great.
I did go through the BIOS and look for like thermal management settings and stuff like that. I found nothing there. The trackpad. Let's talk about the trackpad. I've heard some interesting things about the trackpad online.
It looks pretty big.
All right, so I'm holding it down for 10 seconds. The problem is it instantly turns off and then nothing happens. The trackpad's big. It works well. The problem is both GNOME and Ubuntu by default, they just only allow you to scroll on the very small side here.
Yes, right.
If you use Purism OS, it comes with Cinnamon, and Cinnamon's mouse control panel settings allow you to actually change it to 2-finger scrolling, which works better. Keyboard's pretty good. The escape key on mine is a little mushy, doesn't always register.
Mushy.
Yeah, my escape key doesn't always register, so I sometimes have to hit escape twice, which means sometimes I have to hit it 4 times.
Yeah.
So it's not awesome that way, but all right, I'm holding down for 10 seconds. Let's see what happens. Maybe grub. I'll keep it at grub so it doesn't boot. All right, so I should be about 5 seconds in. This thing's really loud.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
This might be like a workplace hazard.
Still running. It hasn't turned off yet. I don't know if it's going to turn off. I feel like I've been holding it for like 20 seconds. Feels like it's been like 10 minutes. Yeah, it's still going.
I know Mike's listening. Mike, telegram me if there's something else we should be doing.
Did it get quieter? Is it quieter now?
I don't think so. No, what I was expecting is the machine should go off, and once it's off, you can then power it on again, and it may. It's not guaranteed. It may.
All right, so I just let off and turn
like
it.
the fans on.
No. Huh. Yeah. Your GQ is loose. So FreeBSD, you have yours. What have been your initial impressions?
It's not a bad piece of hardware. If I'd have seen it in the store before backing it, I probably wouldn't have bought it. All in all, it is nice, except for, like I said, the loose G key. And of course, when I'm running something other than PureOS, I have trackpad problems that I'm going to work on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's been my experience too. Performance, pretty darn good. Performance, how you thought it's been pretty performant on yours?
Yeah, it performs really well. I've done some full screen flash movies on it with no problem.
Now, Wimpy, I guess sort of the trackpad has a bit of a rep. You know a little bit about some of its tricks already.
Yeah, there's no mainline Linux kernel support for the trackpad that's in the Librems. So there's been a few of us working on a driver for the BYD trackpad, and that's currently an out of tree patch. And what Purism are doing is shipping a bespoke kernel with PureOS that has the full touch gesture support in Pure OS, but if you install any other version of Linux, then it will revert to a PS2 mouse.
Hence the weird scroll and stuff like
Yes.
that.
So I have a kernel patch I can send you.
Wow.
Take it back like 10 years here.
This is not why you buy a laptop dedicated for Linux, though. You know.
No, that this is the point. And the other thing is, you know, when in the past you've talked about System 76 don't just take the ODM equipment and stick their badge on it and ship it out the door. They actually work on, you know, firmware and BIOS enhancements and all the rest of it and get bespoke changes.
Right.
Yeah. This is the same sort of thing that Entroware have done, and they've overcome some of these issues that you're discussing now, like the fan, for example, and that doesn't seem to have happened here.
So here's the rig I got. 8 gigabytes of RAM, 500 gigabyte SSD, which I paid a little extra for. It's supposed to have a CD-ROM and DVD. It does not, which I don't care about. I'm no big deal.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at the specs I bought on Indiegogo. It is listed as having a CD and DVD-ROM. It also ships with like a 65 watt adapter, which I'm not sure is actually enough. It takes a
interesting.
while to charge. The nice thing is that's kind of small. I paid for a Core. This is a 3 gigahertz Broadwell CPU. Iris 6100 graphics. 8 gigabytes of RAM. I would have preferred 16. 8 gigabytes of RAM. 1920 by 1080 display. I paid $1,824 for this machine. If I was going to spend $1,800 on a machine today, you could guarantee it's going to come with Skylake. You could guarantee
Probably at least 16 gigs of RAM.
maybe dedicated graphics
Maybe
at
dedicated
$1,800. You might get that too. Now, is it going to be something that has hardware switches for a webcam? Is it going to have something that has hardware switches for the mic and stuff like that? I actually do really like that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And I also like the idea of supporting a company who is pushing the conversation about privacy and security forward, and it's their primary leading cause. So those are things that my money went towards that I still like. It basically where I'm at right now with this thing is it has a strange USB-C port that I wasn't expecting.
Yes, I saw that. That's interesting.
I don't know. You see, it didn't come with any documentation. It just came.
So there's no manual. There's
naked in the box, in a very generic box. In fact, when I got the box, I immediately started to feel like, oh no. Like I immediately started like this. It was starting to set my expectations low because the box was
The fit and
used.
finish kind of thing.
It had like 5 or 10 other FedEx stickers on it, and there was not even like a brochure in the box. Right? It was no documentation, nothing. No thank you for backing our project. Sorry it took so long. Nothing. And so that sort of was like, I'm a little worried about that. That all aside, though, like one of the things I would have liked to have had in the box is what is this USB-C port? Because the one I backed doesn't have this port. The one I backed, where this port's at, was an Ethernet port. So, and is this USB? Can I charge the device with this? Because it has.
Is it real USB-C?
It's USB-C with an electricity bolt. Does that mean I could actually draw power from that port? Like, what does that do? And I got nothing. I got no. There's questions if this is actually HDMI 2.0 or not. I'm not sure about that. Those are issues.
Have you tried the SD card slot?
No. If I can, but I think the other thing I like is it looks like perhaps that's a physical switch for the SD card slot.
Oh, wow.
Perhaps physically turn it off. I'm not sure. If I could get this fan replaced, this is a pretty. The thing I do like about this is it is a damn unique one-off laptop.
Yes, it is.
And
it looks pretty special wherever you are with it.
It's a great showcase for a lot of really good stickers because it's completely unbranded all over.
It really draws your eye. There's no like big Mac logo or Dell logo.
No Intel sticker, nothing. In fact, the only sticker on it on the bottom is a UPC barcode, a small one. And other than that, it is untouched. It is a metal housing that is untouched. It feels good in the hand. It has that MacBook angular slope to it.
Yes, it does.
It's got 1, 2, 3, 4 USB 3.0
That's pretty
ports,
good.
plus the USB-C port.
It's like 4 times as many on that Mac.
HDMI out, and it has headphones out, and it has an SD card slot reader. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
This could, my XPS 13 doesn't have an HDMI port, or I'm sorry, doesn't have an Ethernet port either.
Right.
If I can get this fan fixed, this could replace the XPS for me. But it can't. I don't know if it can be a production machine without. The lightning bolt by the Type-C port means it may support Thunderbolt, says North Ranger. Is that true, North? Is that really a thing?
A lot of vendors, especially if you have a Broadwell system, are using an Intel add-on chip in the chipset that provides not only Type-C port, Type-C USB support, but also 40 gig Thunderbolt, things like external graphics cards.
That would be if I could hook up. See, that would make me feel a lot better if I could hook up a high-end Ethernet adapter to that USB-C port. So here's FreeBSA's. He sent this to me when he got his. There he was listening to episode 131 of Unplugged, where we're like, where the hell's my laptop? And there's his purism right there. What was your out-of-the-box experience like, FreeBSD? Was it the same kind of like rattle experience, or did you get some documentation? Did you get what was your initial experience like?
Yeah, documentation non-existent. I haven't played with the hardware switches yet to figure out what they turn off, but it would be nice if there was some information. I even looked on the hard drive to see if there was documentation in the form of a PDF, and I don't see anything on there.
All right, so I'm turning it back on. I'm gonna check. Wimpy,
there's proof.
Yeah, Wimpy wanted to know if the BIOS. I want to give Purism credit here. The BIOS is like every setting you could ever want to tweak is available.
That's cool.
Some OEMs, when they basically all of them, they really kind of limit down the BIOS. And this one, you can tweak everything from overclocking to everything. So. It's that being said, there's so much in here. It actually takes a little while to find stuff. I'm looking through here right now, and I don't know if I see Bluetooth, chipset, security. Look at all this stuff, Wes. I mean, look at all of these have submenus to them too. Like, there's just a ton of stuff in here. Yeah. What specifically are you looking for, Wimpy?
Does it have a Bluetooth device in it? And the reason I'm asking you to look in the BIOS. I believe it's a BIOS, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has a BIOS. Yeah.
Is because I'm not sure if the Bluetooth device that's in the machine is supported by Linux, so it may not show up.
Oh, I could. Let's see. I don't see anything in the BIOS, but you know what I'll do is I'll boot into Entroware Arch, and which boots. I mean, one thing by the way is once Linux is installed, this thing freaking flies. Like, it is nice to have a nice modern computer again. I tell you, it's been a while since.
It looks like it got that Samsung SSD in there.
And that thing is fast. So I'll see. I can log in right now, Wimpy. It just boots that fast. I'm already booted. I'm already in GNOME system settings. So I will take a.
It does look like it supports UEFI, right?
It must support. Yeah, it does. Actually, look at that. It's discovering the Bluetooth devices. It is discovering the Bluetooth devices around me right now. So it must have Bluetooth in it.
Oh, right. Okay, cool. That works then. That's great.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
That was something that they'd mentioned may not work at some point in the past, so they must have changed their... I
haven't tried the webcam either. Let me try the webcam real quick. Yeah, webcam works. Hey, look, that's me. Hey, look, Wes, there's you. See?
Well, it's me.
Yeah, webcam. So the webcam works. That's good. The frame rate's a little low, but I'm going to keep playing with it. I think my next big task is see if I can alter that fan. And then on top of that, I'm going to just benchmark the shit out of this thing.
Yeah. It's already going to sound super loud, so you might as well, make it do some work. Yeah.
Well, it's funny how mentally in the back of my mind, I associate loud laptop with high CPU usage. So after I've been working on this thing for about 20 minutes, I was sort of just, getting in the flow of things. And I remember thinking, I stopped my workflow and I go, why is my computer working so hard? Oh, wait, no.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah. So if anybody knows anything about the fan noise, I'd love to hear
if you could get that solved. I mean,
yeah. But that side, I'm gonna put that aside. I'm gonna keep working with it and see what kind of things I can get done with it. So just to recap, I paid $1,800 for this thing. It did ship 286 days late. It was originally expected to ship on April 2015. I backed it in November of 2015, I believe. November 22nd, 2015, I believe was when I backed it. Oh, I'm sorry, 2014.
14, right.
Sorry. I wouldn't necessarily buy it today. But that said, I think it would be interesting. Like, I'm picturing bringing it to conferences and whatnot.
Yeah, you would, it might be a pretty good machine, especially if you can just a little quieter.
And the feel in the hand is good.
Yep.
The hinge is good on the laptop screen.
And it's nice to have something that feels like that.
Yes.
And it's not... oh, I bought a MacBook and I put Linux on it. It's like, this
Right.
is something totally different.
Yes, exactly. So that's exactly how I'm feeling right now about it. So this is the Rev 2. Oh, one more thing I wanted to show you, which I'm not super happy with. I'm going to talk more about this on last, and I'll have visuals to show you guys. It does have a backlit keyboard, and all of the FN keys work, but I want to show you what the backlit keyboard looks like, Wes. Oh, hold on a second. It's not working. Oh, there you go. So the keys are backlit, but the actual letters themselves are not translucent.
No.
So just there's light around the keys, but you can't
It
actually
doesn't
see.
seem like that would be that bright at night.
It doesn't work because the keys themselves are black objects in the night, and there's just light around them. The keys there's basically an LED light behind the keyboard, but the keys themselves.
So if you were concerned about where the keyboard was, it would help you find that, but not the individual keys.
Exactly.
That's just,
yeah.
they were confused about that.
Exactly. So if you ever need to find your keyboard, it can do that pretty well, but you can't find individual keys. So I guess at the end of the day, I would say if I was betting the farm on a laptop right now and that was my machine, I could make it work, but I would be very disappointed. How about a little follow-up on the Librem? I still have the Librem 15. I have a lot of thoughts on it. So let's talk about the Librem and the Apollo. So, as you may have been aware, Wes, last week, after 445 days of waiting, I had a chance to try out the Purism Librem 15.
Ultimate Linux laptop.
And I don't know if, you know what, to get the timing right on this, we're going to go to the horse's mouth directly here for a moment. But my recollection goes down like this. In the time since I backed the Purism, a company I'd never heard of called Entroware has come around and has started shipping laptops, preloaded, by the way, with Ubuntu Mate. And they have a couple of different products out there. We'll talk more about that in a sec. But the one that I want to talk about today is Entroware's Apollo laptop. I think it starts at base price around 700 US greenbacks, somewhere around there, depending on the conversion rate. It is a 13-inch laptop. And I have it here in my hands, and they sent me a version of the Apollo, pretty well spec'd, to see how it stacks up to the Librem 15 and others in terms of build quality, performance, and all of that. So I have it here, have had it for about 24 hours. And before we go any further, I want to introduce Mike from Entroware. Mike, welcome to Linux Unplugged, and tell the folks listening what you do over there at Entroware. What is that title of yours?
Hi, I'm the co-founder of Entroware, and we build Linux computers for the UK at the moment, and soon some of Europe.
And the Apollo arrived on my doorstep yesterday, and it is a 13-inch laptop, very similar in sort of look to, say, a MacBook Air or really the Apollo 15 only, the Librem 15 only 13 inches. Very, very, very good build quality. And so, Mike, I'm just curious, I don't actually think, are you selling these in the US at the moment?
No, we're not selling them in the US for a while. The reason why yours has got a US keyboard layout is because we're going to be shipping them to some EU countries because they also use that layout.
Oh, I got you.
see.
I got you. So, a little bit about the Apollo, if you would. Can you give me some background on how this computer came to be and any kind of interesting details about the Apollo?
Yeah, we started selling Linux computers about a year and a half ago, maybe two. We got a lot of requests for an Ultrabook, and we just found an ODM in China where we could have them built and shipped over.
It is you make it sound so simple, but what I find to be remarkable about it, and this is something that every single person that I have put this in their hands has said, is it feels really, really sturdy, really well built, and they also, people often tell me it feels a little heavy, which I think adds to that it feels well built.
Right.
And so I'm curious how. Was it a matter of finding the right builder? Was it what is it that Entroware has been able to accomplish here when it comes to build quality that other vendors sort of in the space maybe haven't gotten to? Is it just happen to be the partner builds a good machine? Because I mean, it seems feel-wise, it's pretty significantly well built.
Yeah, so we approached a few people, and these were one of the few that did solid aluminium chassis. So we chose them, obviously, because just better build quality.
And then the keyboard also. I don't know what the process was of selecting the keyboard, but versus some of the others, the keyboard is pretty nice too. And feels good in the hand. The keys are actually translucent, so the backlighting shines through, which is nice. And the fan isn't running crazy loud. The fan actually seems to properly cool the machine, which was a nice surprise when I took it out of the box. Was there any particular tricks you guys had to pull to make this thing work properly with Linux, or was it all pretty easy?
Well, at first, the first revision we had, there was a few problems with the fan, but we had them ironed out in the firmware, so that's now gone.
Yeah, I would agree. So if there was definitely some problems with the fan, if you ran into the same problems I did. So if I wipe the OS that this came loaded with, will the fan still work fine, or will it stop working normally?
No, it'll work exactly the same as what it's doing now.
So it's firmware level then. It's totally hardware level. Well, that's awesome.
That's
so
great.
I got it. So my first impressions of this are this is one of the most well-built laptops I've ever held. Would you agree with
Oh,
me?
yeah. I really want one now.
Yeah. So it's got two USB 3 ports plus USB-C. It's got an SD card slot reader, full-size HDMI out, and a headphone jack. Entroware was kind enough to include a USB Ethernet adapter in the box, too, because there's no USB Ethernet on this. It's got a 13-inch screen, 1080p resolution on it, 2 hard drives, a 500 gigabyte spinning for the home, and a 120 gigabyte SSD for the root. Yeah, 2 hard drives in a 13-inch laptop, too. Mike, that's a pretty impressive spec. Skylake Intel processor, and it's silent.
I haven't heard it sound since I've been here.
Yeah, that's a pretty impressive piece of hardware. Are the Apollo cells meeting your expectations?
Yeah, they keep growing as we get more publicity on them, because they are really good for the price.
Yeah, base $700. Now, the base $700 unit, I think, has like an i3 and 4 gigs of RAM, but you just bring it up from there.
That's right.
And then, Mike, could you talk a little bit about the choice to work with Ubuntu Mate? What drove that, and how's that going?
Well, I was approached by Martin about a year ago, and we just headed back into, and I was a big fan of the project, so it was obviously a good move to start shipping them on machines.
Yeah, it feels fast. You know, it's my first experience with it. When you get a machine, you know, with a nice fast Skylake processor and plenty of RAM, and then you throw the Mate desktop on there with the Ubuntu base, it feels really snappy.
Just ready to go.
Yeah, and the battery life, I don't have numbers yet, but the battery life has been pretty good, and I think part of that is because the desktop environment just isn't really very demanding. So you feel like you get a nice performing computer with a very reasonable modern desktop.
Plus, you get someone like Entroware here, where like they're a company, right? So like if you have problems longer term, you know they're going to be around to support them and to fix them.
So the number one question, Mike, that everybody in the chat room has is how likely and possible is it for Entroware to eventually start selling in the U.S.? Is that a possibility for you guys, or is that just a lot of trouble?
It is a possibility, but we're going to wait for a few more, a larger amount of orders before we start shipping over there. We're going to make sure all of the EU sorted first.
Sure. Yeah, you get it nailed there. That makes a lot of sense.
We'll have to work on a JB group order.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, group order. This thing is, boy, I can't wait to just keep trying it over the week. This is going to be my main machine for the week.
It seems like a great little getting stuff done laptop.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to putting it through its paces. So far, it sounds like it's silent, and silent is a big deal for me. So I'm really happy about that. And one thing I may be continuing to troubleshoot, and I don't know if it's just the Wi-Fi here or what, but I've had a couple of Wi-Fi issues where either the transfer rate has been real bad, like I'm getting 2,000 millisecond pings, or it just won't find the network. But in both cases, it actually could be interference. So I'm going to take it out to a known good location where I only have one Wi-Fi access point. There's no other Wi-Fi access points around, or access eyes, and see if I have any issues. But so far, I other than that, and then with the Ethernet adapter, of course, I've had zero problems. And Ubuntu Mate has been pretty great too. I really like the design. Because it's a little bit smaller than the Librem, it feels a little tighter. There's a notch where you put your finger that kind of is reminiscent of the way the MacBooks do it.
Yeah.
Which looks nice. It really all comes together. It's got a bottom plate that could be removed with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 screws. So you remove 12 little Phillips screws, and it looks like the bottom plate would come off. But
it seems like such a good laptop. Like you show up at a conference, and it's just a little different, and you've got it running Linux, and it works well.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I really like it. I'm really, really happy that the keys are actually the letters are translucent, so the backlit key light actually shines through the keys, which is nice. Because otherwise, it's kind of pointless to have the backlighting. Mike, is there anything else you want to add about the Apollo before we move on?
No, that's it.
Very good, sir. And Wimpy, was there anything you wanted to add? Any
There's
thoughts?
something I'd like to add.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mike's being far too modest. Mike has internship with a company that you'd be very interested in hearing about, I think.
Tell me more.
They're Valve partners.
Valve? Well, okay, Mike. Now, are you burying the lead here? Hold on. We have ourselves a little Valve story. I got to hear it. Tell me about it.
So we're official Valve partners, so we're going to be building a Steam machine and shipping them out in a few months.
Ah, very cool. Have you already begun testing? Come on now. Are you a gamer, Mike?
Yeah.
Cool.
We had our prototype at our camp this year for people to use, and got a good reaction.
So Mike, I gotta say, I don't know a lot about Entroware. My initial impressions is you guys are very clever. So it struck me just in the name of this device. It's a pretty great device, and you went with the name Apollo, which when I say Apollo, Wes, what's the next thing you think of?
Fast.
Oh, you do?
Well, I don't know.
I think 13. I think Apollo 13.
Oh, 13.
Right. And what is this?
A 13-inch. Yeah.
It's a 13-inch laptop. It's brilliant. I mean, it shows you a little bit of the. To me, I think it sort of demonstrates a little bit of the thought that goes into it. It's an Apollo 13, but of course the product name is just Apollo because the 13 just sort of comes naturally.
It's part of it.
And it makes you think, what laptop did Chris get? He got that Apollo, and how big was it? Oh yeah, it was 13 inches, Apollo 13.
That's clever.
Yeah, and the 15 should be called Creed.
No, nothing ever gets called Creed. That has been banned. But yeah, so I think it's pretty good. Kitson, you had something you wanted to add? To go ahead, sir.
When you said Apollo, I actually thought art and illumination, like the Roman/Greek god.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Fine. Not everybody thinks
And
Apollo 13.
But it does have proper backlit keys, so illumination is accurate.
All right. Okay. Fine. All those are good. See, it's a clever name. Nonetheless, it is a clever name. So I have if you're listening to the audio version and you're curious, what the hell does this thing look like? And probably a lot of you are listening to the audio version. In the show notes, I have a link to an album I took up at my campsite. And I posted pictures of it because I was like, hey, you know what? You know what makes a good background for photos? The frickin' Pacific Northwest.
Yes, it does.
It's a pretty good looking state, so Washington is, so I put that up there. And yes, it does have an Ubuntu button. Actually, it's a Mate button. So that's pretty cool.
I liked seeing you could customize that right on the website. That's great.
Yeah. And it's a sticker, but it's a translucent sticker. So it doesn't block the light, which makes it
that attention to detail.
Yeah, it is. It's very well done. So I'm running Ubuntu Mate 15.10 or Mate or whatever edition on there. I may stick with that. I don't know what exactly it is, but this particular hardware has made me also want to just see what it would be like to have elementary OS on it. Just to kind of go all the way. I don't know, though, because the thing is right now, for testing, Ubuntu Mate makes such a great low-key desktop environment that it's like you just get all of the machine's performance out of it. So I just don't know about it. Wimpy, you had one more comment. Go ahead.
The version of Ubuntu Mate that you're running there is actually sort of Ubuntu Mate 15.12.
Really?
Whoa.
So, yeah. So what you've got there is Ubuntu Mate 15.10. And then I worked with Mike to get the Mate 1.12 desktop on there rather than Mate 1.10. And the reason we did that is because in Mate 1.12, we introduced in the control panels 2-finger, 3-finger touch configuration options.
Yes, and I do really appreciate that.
So that's why we've just given you a slightly custom version. But
so if I reloaded the OS, I might not get the trackpad configuration stuff.
No, the trackpad works on all OSs.
Sure.
But Mate didn't have
the
three
UI
finger touch options until just recently.
That is it's actually exceptionally nice because it's a good sized trackpad, and when you go into the mouse settings in Mate, you can say 2 fingers down is a right click, or in the corner is a right click. I want to scroll by touching the right side of the trackpad. I want to scroll by using 2 fingers. Like all of that is available for you.
Wow.
Yeah. Really nice. So that's good to know. Yeah, I think I might stick with it. I really have very little reason to replace it once I have it all set up. It really works super good. But, the only thing I might want to replace it with. Yeah.
Sorry. I was going to say, you'll be fine when you go with Antergos as well, because I know Mike runs Arch.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Cool. There. And, I was also thinking all the other thing I might do is I might do the 1604 version of Ubuntu Mate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just do that. Because that would likely still have the configuration options, right, for my trackpad?
Yeah, that's all built into 1604.
Boom. Boom.
Done.
I loves it. I have not done the distro balance the chat room was asking, so yeah, there they go. But I might by the time LAS comes around. I think if all goes as planned, this will be my review for LAS, and we'll compare it to the two. I might try to do some performance stuff.
Yeah, you should.
If anybody has any questions or even better yet, suggestions of ways to benchmark a system like this that actually produce information that we care about and that is relevant, I would love to know that. linuxactionshow.reddit.com. You could link the benchmarks there or something like that. Okay. So Wimpy, I will absolutely have to have Loki if I want to try it on this machine. Why is that?
Yeah.
For elementary.
Elementary is based on 1404,
right,
which doesn't have Skylake support.
Right. And Loki's based on 1604. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well,
you need 1510 or better.
See, somebody's got to make me a Loki ISO. Because it looks like if you here's my thinking, right? You put that on here, and then you go to like a mall or somewhere. You say, look at the new MacBook. What do you think? Let's see what they say.
It's your inner prankster, Chris.
And before we walk away and say, it's a big MacBook ripoff, I want to actually make sure I'm clear. When I look at it, I actually don't get the impression that it's trying to rip off from the MacBook. What I get the impression of is aluminum makes pretty good material for this.
Exactly.
And when you make a 13-inch machine, there's only so much room. I actually, in some ways, I would say there's potential. The keyboard may be better than the MacBook keyboard. I'm going to type some more and tell you the truth if that's... I don't know about the trackpad, but the keyboard I think might be better. And this thing with 1, 2, 3 USB ports, I think outclasses the MacBook in terms of connectivity, plus a dedicated HDMI out port and an SD card slot reader. This thing might outclass the MacBook in connectivity, but I'm not sure about that. And so I don't actually. I think it's selling it short to say, it's copying the MacBook. I think what it is, it's taking design cues from a good design.
Exactly.
But it also, I think, is its own product, very much its own product, and I like it a lot. That's my first impression. If you want to check out some pictures, go over to the show notes. And if you got ideas on things you want me to do to test it, let me know. So Skylake, it's got Intel graphics. So we'll see what happens. We got two drives in there. Those are some significant pieces of hardware for this year, and it's interesting to look back at those reviews now. Next, we're going to talk about another piece of hardware that was way more important for everyone else out there. I actually got one myself, but first, I want to thank DigitalOcean for sponsoring this episode of the Unplugged program. Use our promo code DOUnplugged after you create an account. You just apply it, and you get a $10 credit. Now, that's awesome, because you can run serious workhorses for like 3 cents an hour, or just run a machine for $5 a month. DigitalOcean is a simple cloud hosting provider dedicated to offering the most intuitive and easy way for you to spin up an awesome Linux rig when you want it on their infrastructure, which is all backed by SSDs, KVM for the virtualizer, Linux for the host system, 40 gigabit E connections into the hypervisor. I'm talking, this is a serious infrastructure wrapped up with the industry's best interface and most straightforward API. It's unbelievable, the pricing. They have data centers all over the world, entire Linux systems, or just the base system. And with Fedora 25 too, DigitalOcean.com. Just add our promo code DOUnplugged to your account and get a $10 credit and support our show. DigitalOcean.com, DOUnplugged. And thanks to DigitalOcean for sponsoring the Unplugged program for all of 2016. DO Unplugged, one word. The Raspberry Pi 3. Wow, what an interesting device. And I ended up getting one pretty quickly to try out a few different projects on it. Okay, so the Raspberry Pi 3 has landed Wait, what? Oops, sorry. I think I just dropped it down the toilet. Hold on.
It's so small.
It is going to be 35 US bones. Has a 64-bit CPU, is my understanding, but it ships with a 32-bit version of the OS. 2 USB ports on that thing right there.
Well,
So, go ahead. Jump in anytime. Bluetooth, by the way, Wi-Fi like we've had before, and 4 USB ports, if I'm correct.
yeah.
So, Whippy, can you say how long have you had this? A little bit, right?
Since Friday last week.
Ooh. So you've obviously been working on this thing, trying to get Ubuntu Mate desktop working on it. What were your initial impressions of the hardware when you sat down to work with it?
It is the same form factor as the Raspberry Pi 2 and the Raspberry Pi B+. So, the number of ports and its size and its arrangement is almost identical. There's one minor change, and that's the location of the LED lights. But other than that, it looks like a Raspberry Pi. I hooked it up, tried to boot my existing image for Ubuntu Mate, and got a very colourful rainbow screen, which basically meant do not pass go. Then started work on making it work. Once I got it working, it's obvious where the performance improvements come from with this device. Yeah, across the board, and in some unexpected places as well. It's got a new SoC, so it's a Broadcom 2837 quad-core 1.2 gigahertz. It's an ARM V8 Cortex A53. It's clocked at 1.2 gigahertz, which is up from 900 megahertz as the stock clock on the Pi 2. And by and large, more or less, just about everything is about 50% quicker on the Pi 3 compared to the Pi 2. So you see that in everything in terms of the responsiveness of the applications. But where you really notice it is it really starts to close the gap in terms of things like if you've got a web browser open and you're scrolling, the web pages, that's much more fluid now, much more fluid. So you've mentioned that there's Bluetooth and there's Wi-Fi now. So they're integrated on the SoC. They're using Broadcom 4343 something chip. And the interesting thing here is that in the past, one of the criticisms of the Raspberry Pi was that the SD host controller and the Ethernet were on the same USB bus.
Right.
So if you were doing a file copy over Ethernet, the performance could really take a dive. The Wi-Fi is implemented on the SoC and on its own MMC controller and not on the USB bus. Now, I haven't tested this yet. This is what I want to test.
Speculation.
But my working hypothesis is it should move data around quicker over Wi-Fi than it can over Ethernet.
It's a good excuse not to bother trying to find an Ethernet plug for it.
That would be pretty cool. That would be pretty damn impressive. Okay, so the hardware impressions. I mean, a 50% improvement across the board. That is damn
same form factor.
That is damn impressive. I like that a lot. I'm kind of curious to see how that might actually play out with multitasking and things like that. How did that translate, Wimpy, for you when getting whatever you needed to do to make Ubuntu Mate work on the Raspberry Pi 3? Because two things jump out at me. Number one is you kind of had to go back and retrofit the released version of Ubuntu Mate to make it work, right? Because you couldn't just say, well, go if you want to make it work, go use 1604, or did you?
No, I because there wasn't much time to do this, I went with the build system I had for 1510.
Okay.
Because aside from the new, feature enablement, I knew the rest of the thing worked. So, minimize things. That said, I still only got about 6 hours sleep between Friday and Sunday working on this.
Last down to the wire, huh? That was But to your credit, you got it right out on release day, so that looked pretty good.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Yeah, it needs some work. So despite the assistance I got from the Raspberry Pi Foundation over the weekend, so they had some engineering assistance, mostly from Phil Elwell, who's just been brilliant. I haven't got the Bluetooth working on the Raspberry Pi 3 for Ubuntu Mate yet, but I'm yet to hear, and maybe over the next couple of days we'll start to hear. I haven't heard if anyone's got Bluetooth working at all yet. It's a bit complicated to get going. And I was sort of groping around in the dark a little bit because I was sort of being drip fed. Oh, you need this binary blob, and and I'm like, no, this still doesn't go. And they're like, oh no, you need this blob as well, which patches that other blob. And you need these patches for this. So it was all good because I got all the information, but I just couldn't quite get the thing to enable the Bluetooth. So I've decided just to sit back for a few days and see
if somebody else cracks it
with the official images. Yeah, so I'm going to start taking a look at the new images. So today, this evening, I downloaded all of the new packages that have gone into the Raspberry and Archive to do with Bluetooth and firmware, and I'm sort of picking through those to see if there's anything different that I may have missed or overlooked. So Bluetooth will come in due course, and it will be delivered via an update, I should think.
Very good. Okay.
Now, there is another thing about the Raspberry Pi.
All right, do share.
The Raspberry Pi 3 that I think is probably more important. I think the Raspberry Pi 3 itself is the hors d'oeuvre. This is not the main event.
Oh?
So in the Pi 3, the video core, the graphics processor, has been upclocked. So the video core was running at 250 megahertz. It now runs at 400. And the 3D graphics processor was running at 250 and now runs at 300.
Okay.
One of the benefits of that is that you can now run 1080p video at 60 frames per second.
Nice, yes.
Which is good. And the other thing is that there's been an awful lot of work going on behind the scenes at the Raspberry Pi Foundation to do all of the graphics enablement in kernel mode setting and Direct Rendering Manager and Mesa and Gallium. And that's sort of experimental at the moment. But I have had it working for brief periods of time. And when that works, it's a game changer because you can turn on the OpenGL renderer in VLC and get smooth video playback in VLC.
Nice.
Not the rather clunky, can't quite keep up software version. And you can also run OpenGL accelerated software, providing OpenGL versions match up. So if you've ever played Neverball or Neverputt, I've had that running full screen, 60 frames per second, no problem. And there are other examples of where that hardware...
On the Pi 3?
On the Pi 3, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is a big deal.
So when that lands properly, it's GLES warheads. GLES is the implementation for the Pi 3. But when that lands later in the year as a fully finished thing, that takes an awful lot of burden off the CPU, and I think that is where this sort of pseudo desktop use case really comes into its own and will start to grow, because using things like composited desktops becomes a reality and alleviates burden from the CPU.
This is
but
good.
As it is, but as it is, it makes a very usable desktop experience. I mean, imagine if for $35 you could buy a computer and plug in a USB microphone and join a mumble room and have a podcast just like we are now. Oh, yeah. Oh yeah, this is all plugged into a Raspberry Pi 3. I'm talking.
That is great.
Yeah.
Drops the bomb.
Well played, sir. Well played. I was going to ask you if you think this is. I mean, wow. I mean, there you go. Podcasting is that's probably something you can barely even do from a tablet. I mean, you can, but it's. When I see this at $35, Wimpy, isn't that a big part of the Raspberry Pi 3 is what the performance for the price? It's not $50. Yeah. It's not even $45. It's 35 US greenbacks, and that seems like that sort of is a game changer. And your downloads must be bearing that out.
I haven't looked since the new images have gone up. I'll check in a week or so to see how things are going. But so the Raspberry Pi is known to be something that retails for $35. Well, or at least the traditional ones. There's obviously the Zero now for $5. And as I understand it, they're trying to keep that $35 price point. So they will introduce features to that price rather than just introduce features because they can, which I think is kind of neat because it's always going to be $35.
Yeah, it keeps the expectation.
It's a step change in performance, definitely, and I think that it's very early now. We're in day 2.
Right.
I think a few months from now we'll be able to see hopefully the full potential.
A smart move, though, on their part to keep the form factor, right? By keeping the form factor the same.
Cases or
groups like
have to, though.
Groups like Mycroft, though, saying, hey, we're now doing the testing, and if everything works out, we're just going to include the Raspberry Pi 3 in with the Mycroft units because it just snaps right in.
Bam, upgrade.
Don't you think that's a big deal?
It's the same price.
Yes. I think that's a huge deal. I think that means that people that are building things, for predictability like that, when you're building something, right, to have that kind of predictability, that's important. Now, for others, there might be other boards out there, but for some of us, that is a huge component just right there. No, $35, about the same form factor. I can snap it in.
When you buy it, probably the same software you used before. We'll just install to it.
I think it's pretty neat. Any other thoughts, Wimpy?
Well, the only other major change that sort of just juxtaposes what you've said is that it does require slightly more power now. So in the past, 1.8 amp or 2 amp power was recommended.
So that's a bit of a twist, yeah.
Now it's 2.4 amp. So if you've got existing power supplies that were kind of on the edge of being acceptable, chances are you're going to need a new power supply.
Yeah.
I use an Atrix lap dock to connect Pi 2 to work on them, and I'm pleased to say that still powers the Pi 3.
Yeah, 2.4 amps is not too uncommon. So Also, if a Mate or Raspbian isn't your flavor, Windows 10. Look at this, Wes. Windows 10 Internet of Things Core for Raspberry Pi 3 is out. There's even a video. Look at this right here. It's Windows powering a wheel, like a hamster.
Go Windows, go.
Just like the hamster.
It's learning, Chris. You got to be nice.
So Windows 10 on the Raspberry Pi 3 controlling a closed-loop wheel. You ready for this, Wes?
Raspberry Pi 3 running Windows 10 IoT Core. The wheel represents a common situation in robotics, when you need to know exactly how fast a robot's going or how far it's traveling. Here I have a display connected to the Raspberry Pi 3. You can see the speed of the wheel, the speed I've chosen, and the power output to the motor.
I just can't ever imagine why you would want the overhead of Windows for such a simple task. It's just, that's never a value argument you're gonna win. It's crazy. Absolutely. But you know what? Good on Microsoft for trying.
It's going to be those people who already have all that tool chain there.
What do you think, Wimpy? What do you think?
That's cute and everything, but let's see them come on a podcast. We're using a Raspberry Pi 3.
That's right.
Raspberry Pi 3 is a nice piece of kit, but what about getting software installed on your distro of choice? Let's take a moment. Let's talk about 1604 and snap packages. Now, there are many things to discuss in regards to this review, and I want to cover all of them as much as we can. If you have not had a chance, it's not a prerequisite, but I would invite you to listen to episode 413 or watch episode 413 of the Linux Action Show, where we did our review. And just as a background, because I don't know if I really went into this in the show or not, but basically every machine in my life, except for that one right there, that Bonobo, got reloaded to Ubuntu 1604.
Wow. Ubuntu
Edition was the one I ran with the longest, and then I put the Neon packages on there because I loves me the fresh Neon. And I guess, actually going back further, it really started the day I got the Apollo.
Yep.
I got really excited by what a good implementation Ubuntu Mate 15.10 on the Apollo was. And then as soon as it felt reasonable, I brought that up to 1604. And then I started bringing all my other machines to 1604. And,
one by one.
Yeah. And so I spent a real solid month in Ubuntu, which for me was a big transition again, going back. And
yeah, I feel you there.
But part of the reason I wanted to do it is because I really wanted to spend, when you just do it for a couple of days, you get totally overwhelmed by all the little rough edges that are just different. Just because it's not comfortable and familiar, it feels abrasive. But if you actually spent time with it, you learn, oh yeah, I do it this way, this now.
You learn the true character of what it's at.
Yeah. And so, I really wanted to give it its due. And so when we walked away, I walked away with some impressions that I had reflected on for that whole month. And those definitely took the stage of the review. I think that the bulk of the stage. But there's a lot of things covered in the 1604 review. And I was curious, Wes, why don't we do this? If you'd be up for this. Let's get your impressions sort of at the top. Then let's go to the Mumble Room, get some of their updates and follow up and their impressions. And then towards the end of this shenanigans, let's talk about some of the things that have changed already or fixed already since Sunday's episode of the show. So like a full spectrum coverage. So as follow-up to our 1604 review, Wes, what are your sort of out of the first gate impressions of this brand new LTS release?
Okay, so for context, both in work and kind of at home, I both skipped at work the 1404 release, and then I used that at home, but I didn't use too much of 15.
I guess this is kind of like for you a huge upgrade.
Yeah, it really is a huge upgrade.
That's an interesting perspective. So you've been stuck at 1204 for years.
And a majority. I use some 1404. I do have like one system at 1510, but yes, there's a lot of 1204. And so there's so much new and so much I'm excited about. I mean, I've used Ubuntu on System D before, but I love doing, system control status and just seeing that breakdown. I'm really excited to see it at servers on work.
Now, did you play with the in-between ones?
Yeah, I played with them a little bit.
Okay, you just didn't use them widespread.
I didn't really deploy them anywhere.
Yeah. And I'm kind of in the same boat. I mean, I traditionally just stick to the LTSs.
Right. And so and it seems like a good point right now where once it's out, it'll have fresh packages for quite some time, and then you have the snap packages, and you have CFS right there.
Have you played with ZFS on 1604?
I haven't on 1604, but I've used it, building it myself or loading it myself, installing it third party on earlier versions. So I'm really excited also about like LXD 2.0, which just came out. I like LXD. I like that model. And Ubuntu supports it very well.
So do you use a lot of other desktop environments other than just Unity?
Yeah, I almost never use Unity really. So I'm trying it out right now. It's not bad. The animations are pretty slick, and it's definitely I've seen the touch ups from what I'm used to. Especially seeing it work. A lot of the deployments with 1204. So Unity's nice, but normally I use Cinnamon a lot for Linux Mint, or I use a tiling window manager. But I'm really excited for just having I feel like 1604 will be a release I can deploy in almost every part of my life. The places where I don't need first-hand management or where Arch doesn't make the most sense, maybe for less minimal stuff, but anywhere where I just need a general Linux where I know that the packages will be what I need. There'll be a way, especially with snap packages, there'll be a way to get the software that I want, and I configure it the way I need. It'll just be. I'm really excited.
Yeah, that's sort of my takeaway too. And I kind of wanted to. I joked a lot during the live stream, but I actually am kind of curious on Popey's take for it because not just because he works with Ubuntu and works at Canonical, but honestly because he's obviously been following this for a long time and has good insight on this. And I wonder too if maybe these are some of the elements that he's excited about. And I know I've kind of asked him to dance it like a monkey before on this topic, but I know that the snap packages are sort of the weakest area of coverage in our review, and it's sort of, I feel like, the biggest long-term ramifications of 1604. And so, I don't know, Popey, do you have any just sort of take on our review and thoughts on it, and maybe thoughts on the snap packages specifically?
Can't talk, Chris. I'm busy playing games on 1604.
Nice.
Yeah, okay. You know what? That's another thing is it is a great platform for Steam games.
Yeah, I kid. I'm joking. I was actually playing Rust.
Yeah, I believe you.
The snap stuff, when I first heard about this a couple of years ago, I was kind of skeptical because the guy who was telling me about this was outside a hotel. We'd all had an intro to what Snappy was, and only a few people had been involved in what it was going to be. And I didn't quite get it. And it's only now that I realize how many people depend on things like AUR in Arch or self-updating applications like Chrome and other things that just sort themselves out and nobody has to worry about it, right? And we used to think that PPAs were a marvelous way to get stuff to users, but actually it's quite abrasive to get from I want to have the latest version of whatever Atom or Sublime or whatever whether it's free software or proprietary, it's quite abrasive to get from I want that thing to getting that thing. And I think Snap can make that a whole lot easier, and also make it so that you can have the latest version of stuff up to date all the time on your system. And that is compelling for a lot of people.
Yeah, extremely. And I know every year I talk to Frank about this problem from OwnCloud. And I'm really curious this year to say, what do you think about this? What are your thoughts on this? I know they're relying right now on the OpenSUSE build service. And so one of the things that we kept going around and around about is this seems maybe like a little bit too late, Poby. It seems like maybe this should have come about. But if you look at the origins of where Snap packages were originally created for, there was almost no route to here without having gone through the Ubuntu phone process, right?
Yeah, we learned a lot from click packages on the phone.
Right. And click packages. That's click packages. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like I'll give you a good example. There's a developer who created a game for Ubuntu phone called Balls, and it's written in SDL2. It works on the phone, and he cranks out a new version once, maybe twice a day.
Wow.
And he can just push a new version to the store, and it's on his customers' handsets, or his users, or whatever you want to call them, the people who play his game. He can build a new level in 15 minutes that he has to work on his game. He can build a new level, crank out a click package, shove it in the store, and thousands of people have it straight away, right? And so that works great on the phone, but you and I both know. I'll give you a little secret, right? We don't have millions and millions of phone users, right? But we do have millions and millions of Ubuntu desktop users.
Right.
So take that technology that we used on the phone to deliver applications super fast to the users on the phone and bring that to the desktop, then all those millions of users can potentially have super up-to-date packages with all the lessons we learned from the phone.
I do like that. I feel like it's one of those things that we won't see pay off for quite a while, though.
Potentially. I mean, we're working on tools to make it easier. So, we're all working on snapifying, we call it. Not formally. That's just like a stupid term.
Not snap crafting or...
yeah, there's not a verb for it, really. Snapping? No.
Snapping, yeah.
You don't want to snap. Yeah. So we're all working on... Yeah, snapification sounds good. Sounds very George W. Bush. And we're all doing a bit of that to iron out all the kinks and figure out, because every application is different and some things have different requirements.
Right.
And because of our security model to ensure that one application can't stomp on the files of another, or you don't get one file, able to access the data from another application and send your key presses elsewhere. There's the security side of things is super critical, and we're just discovering the edge cases of, what each application needs in terms of security with Snappy. And so we're pushing the boundaries of that, trying to make sure that we're getting all that done so that when a developer comes along and wants to Snapify their app, it's all ready for them.
This is something that I want to talk to you about because I was just arguing with Noah that one of the emails we get all the time on Coda Radio, and one of the things that Mike has run into is he says, right, okay, I'm going to develop for Ubuntu. I'm going to release an app for the Ubuntu desktop for Ubuntu users. And I'm going to use which SDK, which toolkit, which backend language, and I distribute it to my end users with reliable, secure updates.
How?
Okay, so if I want to distribute for Ubuntu reliably via software update, how do I do that? And if I'm say I'm the developer of your favorite application that's available for another platform that just has decided now's the time to target the Linux desktop. How do they figure this out? They either A, somehow get it submitted to Debian downstream, right, so it gets included in the Ubuntu repos and thus gets updated when there's system updates. They figure out how to create a Launchpad account and create PPAs and publish their own repo. They figure out how to package a deb file or pay somebody which is a common thing that developers do, is just hire some guy or gal to package a deb file for them. And then they post it on their website, which then means you don't get to take advantage of any of the built-in package management.
Nope. Check back.
And so, what Mike and I have kicked around a ton on Coda Radio is this is a shitty story to tell developers. This just doesn't work for them. They can't bank on that. They can't take that to the bank. And so I think that the snap packages is probably the best answer to this. And I think it answers a bigger question than we all realize is being asked. Do you agree with my sort of rough assessment, Popey?
Right, and for a slow-moving free software project, there's a good argument for you should put it in Debian or AUR or wherever that hits the most number of free software developers.
But that's not really practical for a lot of people that are maybe bringing something over to the Linux desktop for the first time.
Right, and that's just one method. I'm just trying to say that putting it in Debian is not inherently a bad thing.
Right.
There's nothing inherently wrong.
If you
with
could
that,
do it, it's great.
Right, but we've seen, or if you can find a Debian developer to sponsor your upload, or whatever the process is. But we've seen recently friction in Debian where an upstream developer wants more recent versions of their application in the distro, and the Debian policy doesn't allow that to happen.
Right, you're referring to the X screensaver thing.
Right, and so with a system where the developer is put in control of how they distribute their code, and with automated reviews and sandboxing, these three things put together means that developers are happy because they can distribute the version of their software that they're happy with when they want to. Users are happy because they get the latest version of crack that they want, and users are also happy, and sysadmins are happy because the system is secure because the apps are siloed from each other. So it seems like a win-win-win all the way around.
Art Brown, I wanted to give you a chance to jump in because also, I mean, we've seen this play out in a lot of instances, but OwnClouds are probably one of the more prominent ones. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, they're a pretty good example of one of those projects where, they're really well. In the case of the Debian one, it wasn't just a case of not able to get the version in there, but also the Debian developer putting in what OwnCloud considered was an unsafe upgrade path.
Right. Now, Richard, I just want your frank opinion, not even as a representation of SUSE, just as a representative of the Linux community. Do you bang your head against your desk? Do you facepalm a little bit when you go, guys, we've got the open SUSE build service. It's working great. Projects like OwnCloud are using the hell out of it. Don't reinvent the wheel with snap packages. Just put it in open build service. Is there a facepalm moment for you, or do you see it in a different light?
There is, to a large extent, when you mix in the Ubuntu mobile thing, there's maybe a case to be made there, but I'm not sold on it. No.
Yeah, this is where our debate was going.
I see.
In the living room, and no, I don't know. When we talked about it, my take was. See, I guess I'm of two opinions, because snap packages on their own right are pretty slick technology and a pretty great idea, and something that I think pretty much anyone who's new to the scene, you can look at how to build these things, how to write the description file, and you're gonna get it. It's gonna be easy. I love that a lot.
And it might be familiar for how you're doing packaging things for other systems already.
Yeah. So that I'm pretty jazzed about it in the big picture. At the same time, I don't want to say this in a flamey way, but if Ubuntu would have just if it could have gone like this, like what if it could have gone like this? Like Canonical would have been like, all right, we're gonna go focus on mobile for a bit. So what we're gonna do is, if you want to worry about getting desktop software on our desktop, we're just gonna hook in with the OpenSUSE build service, and we're gonna hook in with that, and that's gonna be our official avenue for getting software on our desktop. And I feel like that would have been a game changer for desktop Linux, because instead of now getting packages bundled for Debian and Ubuntu out of the goodwill of the developer, it would have been a standardized method to deliver software to the Linux desktop.
What guarantee would Canonical have had that the OpenSUSE build service would have kept their values and their priorities in mind?
Besides the fact we've been doing it for 10 years now?
Well, I guess what I'm asking is, Canonical invented the PPA system, and better for worse, they have these debs that are available on the download. But that was at the time that came out. That was far and away better than anything else we had on Linux. And so I think it's a little unfair to say that because other competition has rose up around them and they are now taking those steps to advance it, I think it's a little unfair to say, well, all of a sudden Canonical has just done it all wrong. And I guess I
don't want to come across as saying they've done it all wrong, because I don't agree. I think that PPAs were a decent addition. And so here's where I'm coming from on this. And just really quickly is Seuss Martin in the Linux Action Show subreddit said, "Sorry, Chris, no offense." Which is always, I'm
about to say something offensive.
Yeah, I just pissed in your flower bed. No, not to upset you. Anyways,
nitrate's good.
But that was not a review. More like an hour-long monologue about how bad PPAs are. And I want to stop right there. I actually think, as far as PPAs go, they're not an awful system. I don't think it's that bad. I think it was a good addition when PPAs were launched a long time ago. I'm trying to look at Wikipedia to find out the date, but they don't have it.
2009.
Thank you.
They certainly filled the need.
Right. Yeah, this was solid in 2009. Great idea. 2009 is too long ago now, and it needed to be iterated on continuously since then. And what happened, in my estimation, is it just didn't become a priority. And then the cloud took off, and then rapid software development took off, and people start creating entire applications that run on the web based on Node.js and plugins that can be completely revoked. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. And in days, they have a new web application. And then in months, they have iterated 3 times. And all of a sudden, we now find ourselves in a world where, unarguably, OpenSUSE were the leaders, where Fedora has a very competent solution, where Arch has a crushing lead with the user repository. We now find ourselves in a world where Ubuntu is behind in this regard. I'm not saying PPAs are bad. I'm saying that if we could have switched over to another solution by now, I like the build service just as my personal one.
Yeah, works well.
We would have fundamentally changed how software is distributed for Linux. The answer for developers that I talked about earlier would have been target the build service. With clear documentation, a large community, and it would have made it available to just about every damn distro on the planet. Now, I'm very excited for snap packages, but at the same time, I kind of feel like it's too little, not too little, but it's too late. 1604 and snap packages, definitely notables from 2016. One of the next segments that's coming up is one of the first not really one of the first, but one of the many super solid technical contributions that Wes has brought to the show. It's been great having Wes on the show in 2016, and our next segment is a great example of that. And it's so great because he's not caught up in all the buzz and the hype around some of these things, and he gives you a real practical, straightforward, working with us every day kind of take. First, speaking of working with things every single day, your education's one of them, and that's Linux Academy. linuxacademy.com/unplugged is where you go to support the show and get a 7-day free trial. Linux Academy is a platform created by Linux enthusiasts for you to learn more about all things Linux and the great stuff built on top of it. And they're just geniuses about the way they've set this up. They have self-paced, in-depth video courses for every Linux and cloud and DevOps topic. They have labs that give you hands-on scenario-based training, which helps me with my testing anxiety. Instructor mentoring is available when you need it, actual human beings. And then if you're not quite sure what path to take, well, they have learning paths for you, a series of courses and content planned by those human beings. They have cert training if that's the route you want to go, nuggets for tiny bits of sparkly wisdom, course schedulers to work with your busy schedule, study guides and comprehensive downloads that have audio or PDFs that you can read or listen to offline, and note cards that are forked and worked on by the community, and the community's full of Jupiter Broadcasting members. I love it. linuxacademy.com/unplugged is where you go, and kind of fun to watch their feed right now on Twitter, twitter.com/linuxacademycom. They're at an AWS event that's going on, and they have a booth there, and there's a lot of shenanigans going on, and they're giving away drones, too. This is awesome, and they have giant plushies. What? I want a giant plushie and a drone. This is pretty cool. Their Twitter feed's great. You can learn about new content coming to Linux Academy and see some of the shenanigans they're up to. Again, that's linuxacademy.com on Twitter if you want to see that and some of the video from the AWS event they're at. It's cool to see them down there and getting like hands-on with all the big stuff that Amazon's announcing today. So that way they can integrate it into their courseware pronto. linuxacademy.com/unplugged. Go there, support the show, and sign up for a 7-day free trial. linuxacademy.com/unplugged. And thanks to Linux Academy for sponsoring the show all year. LXD, it's like the non-hyped Docker, and Wes has had some real hands-on experience. I love this contribution to the show. All right, Mr. Wes, so you said to me, okay, Chris, I know we've talked about Ubuntu 16.04 a lot, but let's be real. We've mostly focused on the desktop, where we've trashed on it a little bit.
Plus, does anyone even use Linux on the desktop? I don't know. No, I kid, obviously.
Oh my gosh. Whew.
But, there's the whole other element of the Ubuntu server.
The server, where it's actually hugely successful.
Yeah.
Like
so have you used it at all?
Yeah, oh yeah. Android, wait, do I have any local 1604 servers? No, I don't. I only have DigitalOcean droplets. Yeah. But we've got a handful of them now. And I don't really have anything to say.
I guess that's a good thing in the server, right?
They just freaking run. We've set up software on them. We have some 1404 droplets we want to move to 1604 because I'll tell you one. Okay. I'll tell you one thing that I have noticed.
Okay.
It is a pain in the ass now to it is a major pain in the ass to write init scripts for Upstart. And it's like the last thing I want to do, or it's the last thing anybody on the JB crew wants to do is learn Upstart at this point.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Who wants to learn Upstart? It's
dead.
Yeah, exactly. And here's the other thing, is that tons of the projects I've been using for a while now have systemd init scripts.
Yep, they come, they're right there.
Yes. So that is sort of the nicest thing about 1604 is now I'm just looking, I can use those examples and things, but that's pretty much the entire summary of my review for on the servers. It works. I don't really have any complaints, and it does everything I expect, which, by the way, exactly what I want on my server.
Right. It just is. Yeah. It's consistent.
So you, however, have had a bit of a bigger routing
change.
I'm
in the weird position of I use Arch for a lot of things. That's the most, what I'm most familiar these days with. I know how to, bend it to my will, get whatever I need to do done with it. I'm in the weird position where I'm considering switching to Ubuntu for a lot of my larger server uses. Mostly because of LXD, as they call it, which is LXD 2.0 is just released, and that's their container lighter visor, they jokingly call it. And it's meant to be a new way to interact with the Linux container or LXC subsystem and the infrastructure they've set up. So if you're not familiar, you can go to linuxcontainers.com, I believe. Mm-hmm. Yeah, .org, linuxcontainers.org.
.org, yeah.
/LXD/try-it,
which we will have a link in the show
notes.
And
you can give it a try right now. And it's a...
Now, hold on. When you say give it a try, you mean I can go to a web page and I can spin up a LXD container in real time?
Yeah, let's try it.
Let's do it right now. Are you ready? You want to do it? Okay, here we go. So I am at linuxcontainers.org/LXD/try-it. Again, link in the show notes.
Yeah, where's the IPv6 connectivity, Chris? At the studio.
I know, right? So I'm going to say I've accepted the terms of service because, of course, I do.
They're pretty reasonable.
Now, they are going to start the container on the fly. Now, because we just gave out the URL, it's going to get slow here. But before it gets slow, you can see right here, Wes, right here, boom! I got a console. I got an LXD container. I'm now root inside a container nested inside an LXD install, which is sort of like LXD Inception.
Yes, right.
What am I seeing here, Wes? What am I seeing?
You're seeing they ran LXC exec container name bash, and it just gets you executed as root inside the container, a bash shell.
This is pretty cool. This is a pretty cool way to do it.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. So they one of the neat things that LXC was pretty complicated to use. It's really neat to use if you've ever tried it. If you need system level containers.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things to learn and a lot of configuration things to set up.
Sure.
LXD, it's a lot simpler, and so you can kind of just get an image going, and they have default profiles set up. So the default one, it runs as an unprivileged container, meaning that it actually runs in a user namespace, so that root in the container is no longer root on your host. It's actually mapped to UID 1 million or something like that. And hopefully to get you some added security. But it also has default profiles. If you want to run Docker in there, you just change your container to be on the Docker profile, and they tweak some of the security settings and the nesting settings so that you can run Docker inside your container.
Huh. So you're just starting to play with this, but how's the workflow bit? Is it pretty easy to use?
It's neat. So LXC used kind of a template workflow, so where you'd use something like Packstrap or Bootstrap or whatever to get your container implemented on the machine you're running it on. LXD uses an image-based format, so you actually just have a tar GZ of your container root file system. And it also takes great advantage of ZFS. It's awesome. So like, on 1604, you just install the userland tools. The kernel module is built for you. You just load that up. It has do sudo LXD in it, and it'll walk you through it. It'll even set you up like a loop back mounted ZFS file system if you want, right? So that's what I'm using on the laptop here. Or if you want to have, you have an actual like pool of disk to use, you can use that or use one that you already have. And so what that means is when you want to use like they give you some image servers by default with the Ubuntu 1604 container image. You can just pull that down. But once you have that image, every new container you start, it's just a copy on write copy of that, right? So it's basically free except for what you change it.
Slick. And all again super easy to set up.
And I've already set up like an Arch version. So they have like Alpine, they have Fedora.
So you're saying you have so for example, if I were to do this on a droplet, I could have an Ubuntu 1604 droplet, but in the container, run Arch.
Yep, absolutely. So they don't have one provided on there. They have like an images.linuxcontainers.org where they have like Fedora, Cora, like lots of pre-built stuff for you, but Arch wasn't one of them. But you just take you make a reasonable Arch file system, you package it up in a tar, and it's really easy to get it as your own. And then the other neat thing is it's a networked, like it's all done over a REST API. That's how the client talks to it. That's how you can talk to it. They have Python bindings, and it also talks over the network. So I can have a server here and then a server on a droplet somewhere, and I can go make myself a new image, have containers here, and if I could make a container I really like here, I can just push it over to the server and it'll run there.
That is nice.
You can even snapshot it here, then push the snapshot up to this. I'm really excited. I might have to change a lot of my infrastructure to use this now.
That is super, super neat. I like Wes's discussion about LXD. And while we're talking about things that are very practical, let's talk about the Linux desktop in terms of pragmatic reasons and philosophical reasons to use Linux. All right, so I don't want to go too far in this without bringing in the mumble room, because this is sort of the segment I wanted to give them a chance to shine. However, I got to ask you. I don't think I actually know the answer to this question either. I was just trying to think if I knew what you were going to say. Do you, today, use the Linux desktop for idealistic reasons or for purely pragmatic, practical reasons today? And is that different than when you first tried Linux?
I think I've kind of come full circle. I grew up kind of playing with Windows. I remember trying to change the Windows boot screen and breaking the family computer for a while, that kind of thing. And you quickly figure out what you can and what you cannot change with Windows. And so Linux started out as just this wonderful playground. And I knew what open source was, and I thought it was cool because I kind of had started trying to program, but it didn't mean a lot. I couldn't really use it to do any, you know what I mean? I could do a lot, and I loved all this software, but it was this is just fun. And it let me really deep dive. And I think somewhere in the middle there, I really stuck around because, at some point I started going to school and Linux was very important for that. You can write a paper on just about any operating system. So I think it really, the ideology, it really did sink in.
Yeah.
And it made me want to try more distributions. It made me want to try to, you can play with FreeBSD or something else, a little different ideology. But I think today, I don't think there's another platform where I could get what I need to get done. There's definitely both parts. Both parts are very important. I think the ideology it's important. I think freedom is important. I think open source is important. But it's also just I need an operating system that is malleable and where I can change things. And the ideology definitely informs that. But at someday, be it as long as it is free, I think I can make it work.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's bounce to the mumble room, and then I'll give you my thoughts. So BC, I'll let you go first. Do you use it today for idealistic or practical reasons? And is that how you started using Linux?
Yeah. So first time I installed Linux, it was 15 years ago. Yes, coming directly from Windows, I wanted to check out what exactly it is. Right now, as I use Linux full time, I'm just much more productive with it. However, it's not just productive because I try to use as little closed software as possible. So, in reality, both.
Yeah. See, it is an interesting thing there too, because you can kind of reach a limit where you're well, I want to be free, and then sometimes you hit that area where you're well, my operating system is free, but this application is proprietary and I need it.
Yeah, I use Windows for some things. For example, game development, I use KVM GPU pass-through, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Good. And sounds kind of like sort of a similar situation. Uber Panda, I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so I started using Linux because of battery life reasons. My laptop on Windows lasted like 1 hour, and I just started using Arch Linux, and it lasted for 2.5 hours. So I used that. And then I understood what was free software, that kind of thing. So it became an ideology, and now I think free software is good, and Windows is also a terrible operating system. So I use Linux for both reasons.
Yeah, interesting. I love it. I think that actually makes a lot of sense. Now, okay, Mr. Heaven, so it sounds like you've been around the block a couple of times, including over to the FreeBSD camp, and then ended back on Linux. So is that for idealism, or is that because it just made more sense, practically speaking?
Well, the reason why I went, or at least, let's say, during my first bit of open source adventures, of course I like the technical things. So I went into adventure in benchmarking a whole bunch of file systems. I found XFS while I was on Linux, and I loved it. Thing is, my philosophy is closer to the BSD philosophy versus the Linux one. So, I actually went over to Desktop BSD and whatever that other one was, and FreeBSD, and I went there for a while. Thing is, their XFS port wasn't up to snuff, it wasn't up to date enough. So even though I love FreeBSD's philosophy of true freedom, it allows you to keep secrets if you want. Linux pretty much prevents you from keeping secrets if you regardless if you want to or not, other than the LGPL. So I went back to Linux because of XFS, because all of my storage was XFS, and it didn't, like FreeBSD didn't actually, provide what I needed.
So
it was more stable.
That'd be a practical reason there.
Yeah, that is actually a practical reason, even though it's slightly philosophical as well.
Oh man, that's so interesting. All right, Mini MC, your practical or idealism for your initial adoption of Linux and where you're at today.
So I wanted to know something new. I started with Linux SUSE 6.1. I just wanted to see something new. And all missing stuff was really hard to replace. And then from time to time it became a feature. So now Linux changed my whole workflow. So it stripped me down to the basics, and I'm much faster, much clearer in my workflow than I was before, I guess.
Interesting. Yeah, I know. What's been interesting for me just on the workflow part is I've had the opportunity now of moving a couple of different types of workflows onto Linux. It started of just moving like desktop Microsoft workflow, like Office and Outlook, getting that running on Linux, doing interacting with Windows file shares, and that workflow was a major workflow. And it took me a while. It took me a while to make that more efficient under Linux, to be able to justify running Microsoft applications under Linux. But I got there. I eventually got there, and then I went as a consultant. I had to move that workflow onto Linux when I did IT consulting for a while, and then. Just here at Jupiter Broadcasting, there have been so many workflows that are sort of, they start with the Mac, and then I was like, I have to move this to Linux. And definitely one of the biggest ones for me was my Unfilter clip editing and workflow. Really? Because it started out as such a Mac-centric couple of tools that I just hated using, and it just was a mess. And moving that over to Linux and finding that to be... And being able to then use all of my my traditional Linux skills on the command line, and being able to take advantage of things like Quake, and be able to take advantage of things like AvidMux, and being able to install codecs by just a command away, it made it very practical in that case to move that workflow over there. So that workflow element, and just because I have a better workflow sometimes is enough of a reason.
And more options in how you make that workflow, right?
So Rotten, I wanted to hear your practical or idealism.
Oh, well, I started as a practicality thing because I was a beta tester for Windows 7 for about a year before it was released. And when it came to the point where they were about to release it, they said all beta testers now had to pay for it. So, and it wasn't like, you had a certain amount of time to pay for it. They stopped your Windows 7 from working.
That's right.
Yeah, so it was completely just stripped away from me. And they gave me, I think, like a week ahead of time. Notice that you're going to lose the access to run the system that you've been working for free to fix bugs and find problems that we've obviously have not finished fixing yet.
Wow.
And then to the point where I was just like, you know what, out of spite, screw it. And I was already dual booting at the time, but then I just kind of just wiped it and went to the Linux way, and been there the whole time. And now it's become both. I didn't really know what the ideology was at the time.
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
It's hard to pick up on it first.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now it's more like the ideology made me stay, and the practicality made me come over.
That's a good way to put it. Landrash, I wanted to hear your ideology versus practicality, where you started and where you ended up.
Probably started in school with, using it when I needed to for course and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Going over to practicality when I got used to it, and basically getting the only way I could do things was with Linux, because I needed the tools. I had the tools I needed there. I'm going to Windows for shooting myself in the foot and doing it 10 times slower.
I think we've all been there.
Yeah. I think he's finding that school's pretty cool. Okay, Mr. Ranger, how about yourself?
Yeah, I'm another one that I started out practical because back in the late 90s, early 2000s, worked at a computer shop where we needed easy internet sharing, and IP chains was where it was at.
Nice.
We, similar to your banking story, we had a point of sale system that was crashy, and the networking on it was horrible. And oddly enough, the perfect solution was run it in DOSBox.
Wow.
And even to this day, just a few months ago, was an officiant at my sister's wedding, and I needed some random government form, and I was trying to figure out how to modify this the way that I needed. And Scribus was, one
nice.
command line install away. So I'd say practically, Linux is so easy to get software for, and so easy to find software that does, whatever task you need that day. So for me, way practical.
Cool.
I think that's an interesting thread, in what Swift 110 here is commenting. It's interesting how, practical is so different. There's a lot of enterprise cases, or if you're a creative type where it's less practical because the tools you need are proprietary and expensive. But there's a lot of other cases where the ideology of freely available makes for these. If you're underprivileged, if you're out of budget for the quarter and you really have a problem that you want to get solved, free software is there for you.
Yeah, it really is. In fact, I'm going to touch on that one. I'll share mine here at the end, but I'm glad WW wants to share his. So go ahead, WW. What's yours?
So I started back in Red Hat 5.1 in 96, 97.
Yep.
I didn't have lugs back then. I lived in the desert, so I was lucky enough to have friends that were into Linux and into ham radios, and you can walk into software, etc., and buy Mandrake Linux or whatever. Or if you were lucky enough, you can have an independent ISP and order Linux online and get it. And so I think I should have been on it longer. I should have been on it before, since Windows 3.1, because I always like to dig into the system and figure out how it's running and what it's doing and how to change it or how to move it around. So for me, practically, it's been something that I've been striving to be more on, even though I've been someone that dual boots and still uses Windows for what I really need to do. It's ultimately where I hope I end up is more on Linux, and I'm not sure about the ideological side. I like to be more pragmatic. So for me, it's more of a practical reason to be on Linux, and that makes more sense in the long term than being stuck on a closed system that you will never be able to open and openly use a way you believe it should be used.
Yeah.
So long term for me, I think it's going to be practical, but maybe once I get a chance to read more into the ideological stuff, it'll be both. But for me right now, it's more of a practical reason.
I think what I'm really picking up, and it echoes mine, is sometimes you come at it from what feels like a very practical reason, and then you get there and you discover the philosophy. So I'll tell you, mine really started as a need to solve a limitation of Windows. Windows just simply, at the time, Windows NT4 was not good enough for the job I needed it to do. And so I had to find another solution. Started very practical. I think particularly for me, if you watch the back catalog of the Linux Action Show with this in mind, you can see where I switch from a pragmatist to more of an idealist, and now I'm on Linux simply because I can't stand to use any other platform. I couldn't imagine having to use Windows as my daily driver. I don't know what I would do. So you could claim that's practical, but I think really I'm here now for the idealism. And I'll tell you, for me, it took a while for it to sink in, mostly because there were so many problems I needed to solve, and it didn't really hit me until I started thinking about it in the way that affected my own bottom line. And then it clicked, and it was really in the sense of my clients kept getting screwed over by companies like Microsoft and many other proprietary companies that would just extort them for support contracts that were unbelievable and that would change and drop features at a moment's notice and completely leave them off on this old version that was no longer supported for a decade because the next version up completely uplifted their workflow. And what I discovered over time, both in a sense of software and hardware and in contracts, is that vendor lock-in can be paralyzing for a company sometimes. And so that was in which the lens that I first looked at the advantages that a core open source infrastructure gives you, the kind of visibility into the long-term viability, or even the emergency eject lever of forking and maintaining it by hiring your own developer.
It's a really interesting business case for that. You get a lot of freedom there.
It's huge because I can tell you can deploy your infrastructure on this, and worst case scenario, if they stop making this thing, you can go hire a developer, and that developer can continue the thing because all of the code is completely free and open source. And for an enterprise, that's not a crazy proposition.
No, if they already have developers, or they can hire one.
Yes, and if it's a core piece of their business that makes them money, they like having that flexibility. And so it was with that perspective that looking at open source, the way that it would solve that problem, that I realized, oh shit, this is the killer feature. It's not the great package management. It's not the stability. It's not the security. It's not the transparency. It's not all of the incredible minds and diverse opinions that are contributing to this. It's this fundamental open license, this GPL that is the actual killer feature of this platform. And it took me a while to get there, but it is based upon that, which I look at everything else. You can't have a practical Linux desktop experience without that GPL, without that idealism that led to the GPL and the GNU stack. You can't have the full practical Linux desktop, which is a sensible reason that we're all using it. It wouldn't exist without that. Mm-hmm. And so it was once I sort of made that sort of transition, that revelation, I realized, I'm actually an idealist. And when I make decisions based on that, in the long run, those always tend to be the ones that pay out. And when I make a decision that's not oriented towards that, it tends to screw me eventually. Exactly. And that has bared out in my personal life for stuff I just use myself, and it's bared out in my professional life with my clients and whatnot. And I'm very, 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 very proud of the fact that I can go back to almost any of my clients, and any of the Linux and open source solutions that I implemented are still maintainable and supportable today.
That is awesome.
And I cannot...
Proprietary solutions don't work that way.
Cannot do that. It's literally not possible because aging them out is part of the process, and locking you into their support path, because that's where they make all of their money in the enterprise, is part of the process. And so it took that particular doorway in which I saw it, then it really sort of lit up for me. But it was very pragmatic.
These two are, I feel like a lot of people, it's that pragmatism, especially I feel like networking is a huge part where you're like, I want my internet gateway.
And I feel like that's a more solid foundation, because if you're just in it for the idealism, then that idealism is going to last you as long until you want to watch something on Netflix, or you're going to watch a TV show. I mean, where do you draw the line at that point? Do you abandon all proprietary lockdown media altogether? Because that's
pretty hard.
And maybe you do, and maybe that works for you. But to me, it seems like that eventually, after a certain amount of time, unless you're freaking Richard Stallman himself, you're going to give. That dam eventually is going to break. And then what do you have if all you have is the idealism?
Right.
If there's not the pragmatic thing that you're also grounded with, I feels like it's not quite as strong as a grip.
If you can't get anything done, then what's the point?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a fascinating topic, and it popped up a couple of times on Reddit in the last couple of days, and so we thought we'd ask it here in the show. And I'd like to hear your stories too, linuxactionshow.reddit.com.
Oh, please go. That's a great forum.
I always enjoy those Linux desktop discussions. I could probably do it every single week. I know you guys would get sick of it, so I don't. But I freaking love it. Like, I just something about like having that conversation with the virtual lug and Wes is super satisfying for me. You know what else is super satisfying? Seriously, saving a ton of money on my wireless. I can't even believe what people pay. Ting is brilliant. Linux.ting.com is where you go to get $25 in credit or off a device, and then you only pay for what you use with no contract. No termination fee. They don't block updates. They're just simply on a mission to make mobile make more sense. They're backed by Tucows, so they've been around forever. And it's so great to just pay for what you use. If you got Wi-Fi at home and work, you're going to be shocked with how much money you can save. And for me, what I love about it is I have a Ting CDMA and a Ting GSM MiFi. When I travel, I use whichever one works better, and I just pay a little bit more that month for my data usage. It's not a big deal because all of the other 10 or 11 months out of the year, I'm not traveling, and so it totally works out saving me tons of money, and you can find out more by clicking on the Ting Savings Calculator. One of the other things I really love about Ting, and with the holidays coming up, you know, you're gifting cellular service, you get like a $9 Ting GSM SIM, and you want to put it in the stocking. I'm serious, why not? $9 SIM cards? Yeah, it's really, with no contract, no other termination fee, just pay for what you use. That's seriously awesome. But you're giving away to friends and family. You don't want to have to play tech support. Well, you don't have to worry about it. Ting has crazy great customer service. They have real human beings that sit on the phone and work with you.
Ting, this is Isabel speaking. How can I help you? Hello? Thanks for calling Ting. This is Isabel speaking. How can I... Hey, this is Isabel at Ting.
People never believe it's a real person, but it is. And I think that's really kind of a cool service that Ting offers. They have great prices, unbelievably cheap devices, all the way up to the Cadillacs or just the SIM. You just get started by going to linux.ting.com. And a big thanks to Ting for sponsoring the Unplugged program now for the whole year. Linux.ting.com. Now, there's a big moment for me personally in Linux Unplugged this year. That's when I gave Wes a challenge to get Arch Linux working on my 2013 MacBook Pro Retina by the end of the show. I was super skeptical because in the past, MacBooks have been such a headache. Well, Wes was up for that challenge. So the question is going to be coming in pretty soon because rumors have it that your friends in Cupertino will be releasing a new MacBook soon.
Hey, it's been about time.
Yeah, jeez, it is ridiculous. And you know what's going to happen? The current models, which are still perfectly usable, will go up on eBay, and people can buy them for a reduced price.
Right.
And we have a pretty common question that comes into the show. How do you install Linux on the MacBook? Does it work? What should I know about it? So this week...
And is it worth the amount of effort that might be required?
Have you ever done this before?
You know, I have, but it's been... Oh boy, probably three years at least.
So this week...
Actually, I was installing Debian.
Really?
Yeah.
Great. I'm going to see if by the end of the show, Wes can get Arch Linux or maybe Fedora Linux, where we'll see, running on a MacBook. It's like a late 2013 model, I think. And we'll kind of give you a report of what it's like to try it. If he can get the dedicated graphics working, the wireless working, and we'll give you a review so that way... Some people out there, they just want that hardware. And this is an old production rig that we have that's like, it's good. I'd like to see if you could leave macOS on there because I think a lot of people are going to want to do that. Based on the emails we've received, people want to dual boot, and I can understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to do firmware updates.
Wes, I officially am handing you this Linux Unplugged branded thumb drive, which contains the latest official released Antergross image from last month.
With the JB signing key.
I checked it for sure. Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So there you go, Wes. Good luck to you. And
thank you, sir.
It is already partitioned into two separate. Well, there's the OS 10 partition because I've played with Linux on there before is like already shrunk down, and so there's like right now I just made it like fat or something for you that you can mess around with. So there you go, Wes. The challenge is officially launched. I wanted to mention something that I think was well said, and it started a conversation that I think probably wasn't necessary, but I wanted to give a shout out to Ninja Aaron, who 23 hours ago created a Linux Action Show subreddit post saying a quick comment about the ButterFS coverage on the latest Linux Action Show. And that's where we discussed the fact that the official ButterFS project Twitter account recommended people use ZFS or ZFS.
That's pretty wild.
That was wild. And our story was really about the reaction to that. But, you know, he makes a great point. He says that ButterFS is definitely having its issues, but he makes a couple of good use case for Btrfs in this post, and I guess I did want to mention, like, I'm not necessarily opposed to the idea of people that want to use Btrfs on their laptop that has an SSD drive. I don't really think Btrfs is like the devil file system. Really where I have an issue with the Btrfs advocacy, it really comes down to when people try to advocate that it should be used in a business/enterprise setting, however you want to describe that. I started in IT in the year 2000, about 99. Well, actually, that's not true. 97 was when I actually officially got paid in IT. When I was at that time desktop tech support. But one of the things that I had I had two challenges over my career that were very much about data retention, and then I had many challenges beyond that. But there were some that were very particular legally and mandated, very, 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 very carefully audited use cases that I can't even really go into. And in these scenarios, back then we used very, very cutting edge file systems that were very risky, mostly because that was all that was available at the time. You had to. Then. Yeah. And so it's not that I'm also like some holier than thou soapboxer who says, oh, you should never use Btrfs because you're a lunatic. I mean, I've been the guy that's been putting a file system that's a little edgy in production.
Yeah, I've on a lot of my systems.
But there is sort of this, it feels to me like there is this failure to look within a bit to sort of self-analyze and say, we've made a mistake here. And so I wanted to acknowledge that while I have been sort of anti-Btrfs in the last few weeks, as there's been more flaws, I also think there's many useful use cases for it. And I wanted to give a shout out to Mr. Ninja Aaron for kind of, very well stating that case and making me reflect on it a bit and go, I myself, for this MacBook here, I would absolutely consider Btrfs on there.
You should have said that like 2 minutes ago.
What did you?
You're getting ext4 just because I figured you wouldn't mind if it was.
I don't mind.
A safe and solid choice.
So you're actually that far, huh?
It's installing right now.
So then, in order for you to be that far, that means you got wireless working.
Oh yeah.
Now that wireless fix, this is one of the interesting things though, is that wireless fix will not persist once you reboot into the main OS after it's been installed.
No, but maybe I'll be smart enough to root into and install that preemptively. Thank you for the reminder.
Damn it. Wes, I'm actually pretty impressed that you got the Wi-Fi working without any other connectivity. So what did you do? Because this is going to be the number one challenge is these MacBooks. Any recent MacBook doesn't have an Ethernet port. And everybody that's going to be doing this is going to run into this problem where they're not going to have Wi-Fi when they get in a live environment. So what did you do to enable networking without having a connection?
Well, I had conveniently, we're installing Antigross here, and I had a Arch Linux little laptop right here. So I just ran make package, built the package, copied it on a USB drive, installed it, mod probed the Broadcom drivers, and away we went.
Well played, sir.
Which I was very pleased. Everything worked perfectly.
Well played.
Network manager picked it right up. We were on the network.
Damn. And also, I'm impressed that you remembered the Wi-Fi password, too. Because I didn't tell you what that was, and you still... Good job. Anybody have thoughts on Btrfs in the Mumble Room before we move on to just a quick shout-out I have?
I'll just say I'm excited for Bcache FS. We'll see when that's actually usable, but...
Is that a B-tree kind of like RAM-based?
I'd second that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Tease me a little bit.
Let's see. There's actually a Patreon for it.
Are you serious? Wimpy, why are you looking forward to it?
Let's throw it right there.
Oh my God.
Maybe that'll explain it better than I could, probably.
Well, Bcache is something that I've used to accelerate spinning drives by putting a Bcache partition on solid state to effectively create sort of a level 2 cache. And the authors behind Bcache realized that they were very close to actually having a full block file system. So they're going the next step to implement it as a copy on write file system.
They only have 38 patrons. I feel like maybe we could bump that up a little bit for them. So it's going to be a copyright on write file system like ZFS or Btrfs They aim for good performance. They say significantly better than existing copy on write file systems, comparable to the performance of Extended 4 or XFS.
See, we really need this, or we're just embarrassing ourselves.
Metadata and data checksumming multiple devices, including replication and other types of RAID, caching, compression, encryption, snapshots, and scalable. It's been tested up to 50 terabytes and will eventually scale higher. Already working on stable with with a small community of users. This is super exciting. And what I really like about it is, and this is where I was trying to get to in the conversation on Sunday, but I think I went off track, is ButterFS, when you look at the model, almost seems like this funding model makes a lot of sense. It's just they would need way more support because it really is a full-time job. It is a lot of work to do this properly. And this is great. So Bcash, I'll put a link to the Patreon in the show notes. So that could be really cool. I'll check it out more after the show. Okay, Wes, I heard you rebooting during that spot. I heard you. How's it going over there?
It's installed. Now we're working on getting it to show up in the bootloader. Do you have a preference? Do you want refined? Do you not?
I don't know. I don't know what's the difference. This is all new to me.
I mean, you can get it to work with the native EFI bootloader.
That seems good.
Okay, but you can also install Refined, which is kind of just a nice, better
What
bootloader.
would make it easier to get the NVIDIA graphics working? Because that's part of this.
Question.
That's part of this.
That's a good question.
Because I think that's like a kernel boot parameter. Because otherwise, I think it uses the Intel graphics by default.
I believe so.
And so I want to talk about why this is happening. Because this is some crazy bull crap. I mean, I will be in full disclosure. I will be honest with you. The number one question we have ever gotten into the Linux Action Show and Linux Unplugged, and I am literally talking since episode 1 over a decade ago of Linux Action Show, the number one question we have gotten is, how do I get Linux working on a MacBook? And we answer it from time to time, but we never really fully go into it. And so it's one of these things that we're simply sick and tired of getting the question asked. And so we just don't address it a lot. And I've been using the Entroware Apollo as my daily driver at home pretty much since my review, and absolutely loving it. And it is light.
Right.
The battery
that
lasts for hours. It's small enough that I can carry it and just bring it to work when I need it, and not have to worry about bringing the power adapter. And it is a very nice machine, and I have all my stickers all over it. I really enjoy it. But then No Man's Sky came out. And that damn game, I can't help but love it. And it requires OpenGL 4.5 support and SSE 4, I think, and basically dedicated graphics. And that's where the MacBook came in.
Yeah, right.
And then I connected with, okay, so I sort of visualize myself as an audience member. I've either bought a used MacBook, I've inherited a MacBook, or I'm sick and tired of Mac OS, and Apple is not getting around to updating this thing.
No.
And one of the things that I know from previous testing experience is that Linux runs a hell of a lot faster on the MacBook than OS X does. So the fact that this is a 2013 is going to feel, I estimate under Linux, probably going to feel like a brand new machine. Like, it's probably going to feel very fast. I mean, it's got the PCI SSD in there.
Ooh.
It's got dedicated 7...
Yeah, I thought about using F2FS or whatever.
Yeah. It's got dedicated NVIDIA graphics. It's got a wonderful Retina screen on it. It's a pretty nice laptop.
Yeah, it is a nice laptop.
And people generally accept that the MacBook is built well. So the question has always been, how reasonable would Linux be on the MacBook? Because my intention is, and I know this sounds ridiculous, is to then install Wine and then install No Man's Sky. Eventually, I plan to also put OBS on there and do some broadcasting from it, because it does have a 4-core processor as well.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that would work well.
Yeah. So that was sort of the impetus for myself to want to try Linux on the MacBook. And then that sort of sent us down the path of trying to figure out, well, what do you need to know before you put Linux on a MacBook? And it definitely seems to be one of the things you have to get your head around is, what model of MacBook do you have? And this is somewhat not obvious, since Apple just calls everything MacBook. And if you have macOS on your system, you can actually ascertain this by going into the About Mac system. And I have a screenshot of this in the show notes. You go in there, and it'll tell you like it's a late model something something. You Google MacBook Pro late model 2013, and it will tell you the specific like model number. It's like it's 11,2 or something like that, right, Wes? Am I?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah, and there's like other ones, like older ones are like different. So it's a major model number, comma, minor model revision, and you can find like Arch wiki entries, which for mine I've linked in the show notes, that specifically tell you about the little kind of esoteric tweaks you have to make it work on your particular MacBook model. And as I look at this, I think this could be a really great Linux box if all of this works out. So I'm kind of really interested to see where it goes. I'll try the Thunderbolt out, and then I can report back to the audience on some of my adventures with it. I also was kind of wanted to pick Wimpy's brain and ask him if he hears many people in the Ubuntu Mate community that are running it on the MacBooks, because that also crossed my mind as a possible distro if we couldn't get Arch working.
Yeah, it does crop up from time to time, mostly in discussions in the Ubuntu Mate community. And if it's something that you're interested in doing, then that is the place to first search, because it's a discourse, so you can find the right discussions easily. And if your model hasn't been discussed, then start a new thread, and there are a few people in there that can assist you with that. It doesn't come up a lot. It comes up a bit, but not loads. It's certainly not a major platform I'm seeing people use Ubuntu Mate on.
Good. I don't know. I just don't, at this point, I don't know if I feel like recommending it. Although maybe I'll feel differently after we try this. I do see it as like, it could, so a couple of things have changed recently. First of all, based on some of my reading, the roadblocks of getting the wireless working, the Broadcom wireless, have been significantly reduced. But the big change, which is in the more recent kernels, been around for a little while now, but depends on your distro, there is built-in kernel-level support with the Synaptics driver for the MacBook touchpad, or trackpad, or whatever you want to call it. And that was something that used to be a sticking point on my particular model. Have you had to do anything to get the trackpad working, or has it been working?
No, it's just been working. I mean, it's not quite as nice as the default one, but I've got scrolling. I've been impressed. The media keys have working, even in the live media.
What about
I can see the high DPI support GNOME working nicely.
Really?
Like you can see the tiny text on the console boot up, and then once you've got to the login screen.
Really? Did GNOME just automatically go high DPI mode?
Yeah.
No way, really?
Yeah. At least in the Integros installer.
Now, what about the keyboard backlight?
That's a great question.
Is that working? Can you turn that on?
Oh, yeah. And it even has the scrollable GNOME menu. Yeah.
Shut up.
Uh-huh.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's actually pretty. Look at GNOME kicking ass on that thing.
Yes.
So are you in the live media right now, or are you in the installed media, OS?
Well, now I'm in the installed OS. Actually, I have to review how it actually got here. I was just kind of troubleshooting that, but I rebooted again, and I expected it to go into Mac OS X, but it went right into yours. So
this is really going to be nice to be able to play No Man's Sky at home if you get this working with. I'm pretty excited. All right, so where are you at with that thing?
I've got it booting. I'm making sure the bootloader is actually working, and getting the Wi-Fi back up.
Nice. All right, let's
see about the proprietary driver.
JB titles.
So this is a MacBook with an NVIDIA chip in it.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's a 750. I think, or a 760.
And is this a new computer or one?
No. It's one that I used back in before. I think even before I hired Rikai for editing. And then once Rikai came on board, he had
750M.
Okay, 750M. He got the dedicated Mac, and then this sort of became every time I wanted to do a comprehensive video editing project, this is my machine I would go to, and still do to some degree. But I've been transitioning to KDN Live more and more. So I've had this sitting around, and it's a late 2013 model. I actually think with an old MacBook, you have a better success rate with a slightly older model, which is kind of bears out why I think you'll probably see more of these showing up on eBay when the new model comes out, because it's literally been too long. And so people throw their old models on eBay, and you might have Linux users who want a particular build quality of a machine grabbing these and snapping these up, perhaps.
So this is a Pro 15 of some description, is it?
Yes, it's a late 2013 MacBook Retina 15-inch with a 750M and the 1 terabyte SSD, PCI SSD, and 16 gigabytes of RAM. And Wes, did you decide on a bootloader?
Right now it's just using the built-in EFI.
So like when you hold down the Option key or whatever it is,
that's what I'm working on confirming for
Interesting.
you. But we might just install Refind anyway.
Yeah, look at you.
Because
Look
it's
at you.
awesome.
Look at that.
It would be interesting to compare battery life between the systems.
Yes, it
You know,
would.
TLP
Yes.
installed and ours. And it would really interest me.
Yeah, I
because
absolutely
they
will
say
do that.
Linux is not well optimized for these kind of computers.
To be fair, the cards are definitely stacked against Linux. However, I was reading the Arch Wiki, and it appears that LM Sensors now has some support. But see, honestly, the core issue I've never really been super compelled to do this is the way Macs are built. They are Intel machines, absolutely, but they use a completely different power management and cooling management architecture than a standard desktop PC. And honestly, if I were Apple, I would too, because ACPI and all of that is just total shit. So what Apple did is they created the SMC controller. And the SMC controller is both hardware and software. And the software component is only available in Mac OS X. There's no open source equivalent to it because Apple holds all of the information. And the SMC controller is used by Mac OS X to escalate the fans with CPU usage. So the OS is constantly monitoring the demands and predicted demands. The predicted demands, if you can even believe that, of the OS workload based on your average workload, and it preemptively throttles the thermal management of the Mac based on whatever metrics that Apple has come up with their black magic. And there's just literally no way to translate that to Linux or Windows. It's the same problem for Boot Camp users who decide to run Windows 7 to 10 on their Mac hardware. They have this same exact issue. And in the past, what I had done is I got a program called SMC Control. And SMC Control is a Mac OS program. What you do is you can use SMC Control to hard set your fans to a certain RPM. So that way, at least there's some thermal cooling. Because otherwise, what happens is without the SMC controller kicking in via software ignition, then the thermal limits of the actual hardware are what dictate the fan
not what
usage.
you want.
No, so when you actually get to the full thermal limits of the Intel i7 processor, that's when the fans cool. When you get to the thermal limits of the GPU, that's when the fans kick on. So by using SMC controller in Mac OS X, I could set the fans at a steady like 5,500 RPM or 4,000 RPM, depending on my workload, and then restart into Linux. If you shut down, then the SMC controller reset. And so if I booted from a cold boot right into Linux, I have no fan control. But if I would first boot into Mac OS and then use SMC Control, which is a third-party utility that only supports most Macs, and then use that to set the fan, and then reboot from that into Linux, I could have proper thermal management. So one of the things that appears to have changed since I had to do that rigmarole was LM Sensors appears to have some capacity to control the thermals on the MacBook now. And so that could make a significant difference in battery life. And it's absolutely an area I'm going to test versus Mac OS, whatever the current release is.
So I was just looking on eBay in the UK at that spec, and they still sell used for around £1,200, which is about $1,500.
Isn't it amazing? See, I think Apple has always managed to have super good resale because they only, at best, release a model a year. It seems. Yeah. So you just it's sort of like there's. By their apparent nonchalant attitude towards their Mac hardware customers, they have created a very robust aftermarket value for the MacBook. But every time a new one comes out, everything shifts down a bracket. So that I believe this MacBook will probably shift down to about $800 once the new MacBook comes out in September. And a Core i7.
Oh, is that still a current model, even though it's been around for a few years?
No. But the current model will shift down a price range, and because this is a model or two below the current model, this is going to come down significantly to about $800. That's my estimation. I could be totally wrong, but that seems to be the history. Is because this is like 2 models or 3 models behind. This is going to be the real bottom basement. Like, still get an i7, still get Thunderbolt, still get Retina, still get PCIe storage, but under $1,000 easily will be this. I believe that'll be the price of this machine. And at that price range, it almost becomes reasonable to experiment with Linux on it and just see, well, what the hell? because it's a $600 to $800 MacBook depending on spec, and at the end of the day, if it doesn't work, I could just do Mac OS 10 with Linux and VMware. And so I think you're going to have a lot of Linux users that will pick this thing up because the cult of hardware worship around the MacBook. They'll pick this thing up, they'll try putting Linux on it, and so I was like, this is probably something that I'm going to get a whole new wave of emails about. I'm kind of preemptively guessing that. Yeah. I'm still rocking Arch on the MacBook. I'm dual booting Final Cut OS and Arch, and I'm keeping it up to date every single week. I love it. Now, let's stop right here and reflect on the fact that Vim's birthday gave a moment for us Nano users to unite. Let's celebrate a very important birthday that almost just passed us right by.
I know, right? But
we did manage to catch it, and it's something that we all can relate to. It's a milestone, the 25th birthday, where Vim's car insurance finally goes down in price. Happy birthday to Vim.
This is a rowdy crowd. Come on, guys. You're in my house. Hold on.
That's right.
No.
Over 25 years ago, it was started. You see, the problem was that Bram, he wanted something like Vim for his Amiga. He was a big user of VI. I should say VI. He wanted something like VI, but they didn't have anything like that on the Amiga. So in 1991, on November 2nd, he released the first version of VI, Imitation Edition. After 3 years of working on it, the VI Imitation Edition. 2 years later, with the version 2.0, so first version took 3 years, second version took 2 years. 2 years later, with version 2.0 of Vim, the feature set had exceeded that of the original VI, or Vi. And so they changed the acronym from Vim Imitation to Vim Improved.
Isn't that great?
That is really cool. That is a big milestone. 25th birthday.
An indispensable tool. I mean, and think about where it's gone and how widely it's deployed today.
Thank God we have Nano. I mean, what? No,
come on.
And they still don't know how semantic versioning works.
I used Nano once in a video recently, and I've been getting crap about it for 2 weeks. Chris, you use Nano?
You just got to say it's for the new Linux users. You're trying to be friendly.
What are you doing? That's what I thought you would use VI or Emacs. Why are you using Nano? That's because I think it's nice.
What are you doing, man?
Nano-W. Nano-TAC W forever.
See, I don't even know what TAC W does. Enlighten us.
Oh man, it just supports wide characters without cutting it off. So it's like when you got config files, that's all it does. But I actually, if I'm editing the file, I don't know what this is. Mm-hmm. If I'm editing the file, I tend to use Vim because I got like my colors and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But if I'm viewing a file and I don't want to use cat or more or whatever, like if I don't want to just like look at the file, I just want to just like for some reason open it up but not edit it. Like when I'm going to look at a file and I'm going to dig around, but I'm not going to use sudo, I use Nano for some reason. And then when I'm going to edit the file with root privileges, I sudo vi then the file.
Okay.
Isn't that weird?
That is weird. But I mean, I can see, if it's just something you've learned in your fingers now and you just type it, right? So
it's like the one is my viewing editor and one is my editing.
Not sure viewing editor
I know,
is a consistent idea.
It's so dumb because I do every now and then when I'm already in there. Now I'm like, well, I'll just change that real quick.
Right.
And then, and then it's like I go to save and it's like
you don't have that.
You don't have the privilege because you didn't sudo
of using sudo t to get out of it, right?
Yep. It's so stupid, but it's habit. It's habit from a decade ago when I was revolting and I wanted to find a new text editor, and I had this boss who was the only other Unix/Linux guy in the office with me, and we would prank each other constantly. And so I remember like I had replaced Vim, like when he would use VI, it would echo like Bruce stinks or something like that on there. Bruce is a monkey on the. And we did things like we'd set up cron jobs to send system-wide messages on the hour, so every user logged into the system would see Bruce smells like a monkey and things like that. Like we'd mess around with each other, and I remember Nano was sort of the prank we would use. Like we'd set up an alias so things would launch in Nano or whatever. Like there was all these. So I think that's where it started, and then it just sort of became. Because I got pranked, I think I just stuck with it. And he's just like, well, I'm not going to let this, screw this. I'm not going to let this defeat me.
I will use this editor.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, it is a fun editor.
And then now here I am years later and I'm getting crap from the internet. It's like, okay, but you guys don't understand.
That's how a lot of stories end.
So I just pasted you a command you can run, which shows the most popular 10 commands in your bash history.
That's a great one.
And for me, the top 5. Number 1 is ls by a factor of 2 above the next thing that I've ever run, which is cd, right? So ls and cd, and then sudo, which is not unreasonable on Ubuntu, where you don't get a root account by default.
Yeah.
And then the next one is my editor of choice, which I'm not going to name because I'll just get hate. And then there's other stuff after that. But yeah, ls and cd and sudo, they seem like reasonable things to have at the top of your list.
So
I think you should say, and we can debunk a myth here.
Well,
I'll go first.
I should tell you.
My favourite editor is Nano. On the
Yeah, same here.
Oh,
Yeah,
were you
it
guys?
is.
Were you
That's my
guys?
fourth command,
Were
is
you here
Nano.
earlier in the show where I admitted to getting crap for the last 2 weeks because I used Nano?
I heard you mention it, and I wasn't here to back you up, but I've been using Nano forever, and this is mostly because the first Unix system I used, Pine was the email client, and consequently Pico was the editor.
Oh my God,
so
Pico, yes.
hard code, and Nano is a Pico clone. So hard coded into my DNA is all the key bindings for Nano. And
I knew there was a reason I liked you, Martin. That must be it.
And all these people that say that, Vim and Vi are so powerful and there's all these key bindings. Well, there's all these key bindings in Nano as well. And if you know them, it's just as fast and productive.
I love you. That is amazing. I forgot about Pico, and that absolutely, and Pine, yes. Yes. All right. So is it Nano for you too, Popey, then I take it?
Yep.
All right. Wow. Now, JDA, I think I saw that go by. You also use Nano.
Yes, I also use Nano, and I'll say as a visually impaired Linux user, I'm low. So it's a lot more user friendly when you're zoomed in to a pretty high degree on a monitor than the alternatives out there. And just as someone who's tried all the different ones, in an accessibility standpoint, Nano takes the cake, and I just wanted to throw my 2 cents in there.
I can't believe we started the show out with me admitting to all the crap I was getting. And Ben, you use Nano as well?
Yeah, man.
Look at you. Nobody stood up. Nobody said anything.
Club Nano.
There we go.
Yeah.
A wrong has been righted.
Wait a minute. You see, guys, I am visually impaired too. I have to wear glasses because I have astigmatism and light problem. And truthfully, I just got to use Nano because of my sight and because, I also have autism, so it's kind of hard for me to wrap my head around other editors.
You don't have to justify it. Just embrace it.
That's
You're
right.
a Nano
I love
user.
the Nano.
It's fine.
Here's some funny follow-up from that Nano Users Unite episode. Since episode 170 weeks ago, I'm still getting emails and trickle tweets about other Nano users who are coming out in their love for Nano. We truly have united, which is, I don't know what that is. It's funny, if nothing else, I guess. I don't know. It's like I'm not sure. We need to support some sort. We need to form like some sort of support group, I guess, right? All right. Well, that brings us to the end. I hope this wasn't your first experience for the Unplugged program, because this is not how this show normally goes. I don't normally have a fireplace behind me. If you're listening, I have a fireplace behind me. I don't normally have presents in the studio. We don't normally play clips of our own show. It's not really how this show actually coming. If this is your first time watching, this might have been the perfect episode, because you now kind of get an idea, feel for what we talk about. You can submit content at linuxactionshow.reddit.com, a shared subreddit with Linux Action Show. You can go to jupiterbroadcasting.com/contact and find out when we're live at the calendar page. Thanks for being here. See you next week. And happy holidays.